I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right. Welcome everybody back to I Mix What I Like. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Please come on in. Have a very exciting, or I should say, I'm very excited for this discussion that we're going to continue to have with Sudip Bhattacharya in just a moment. Please do all the things and put this in your socials. Let others know to join you. I do happen to know that there are a number of other powerful and important discussions happening on other streams. I'm thinking in particular of millennials are killing capitalism right now. But so I'm not mad if folks are there and missing this live, or who show up here and then want to go over there. I don't think either of us would mind that, and you are welcome to just come on back and join this conversation much later or after the fact. It'll be here, so yeah. I also want to welcome Solmega and Uninformed Opinions as members. Welcome to the channel. And please check all the other content and do all the other things as well. In fact, we also could thank Summoner Geek and Southside Smitty. Welcome to the platform. Thank you all very much. And greetings to the rest of you. All right. So that said, Sudip, welcome back to the platform. It's good to see you again. Folks, Sudip's work is linked. His Substack is linked in the show description. I have been, I kind of dived in a little bit this week, and it's a lot of good stuff, some fascinating stuff. You have arguments and disagreements going on, and in parts of the world that I'm not familiar. So it was been fascinating. But anyway, welcome. Good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for yeah, I'm really excited about this series that we're doing. It's been very enriching, and yeah, I don't know. And I appreciate you linking the Substack, because yeah, I do have lots of disagreements.
Not just disagreements. I mean, you also have important thoughts and essays and other things. But
Right, right.
and I didn't even know until I saw your because I don't engage Substack that often, to be honest. But I didn't even know you can do video there. So I thought that was pretty cool to see.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You one of your video blogs. But yes, we are here, folks. In case anybody is new to this particular series, this is Sudip and I are working on a project tentatively or in part titled the Donut King Project. That's at least how I have it labeled. Looking at the gaps between the realities and the narratives as it involves Asian, broadly speaking, and that's part of our discussion, and Black economics. So this in this edition, we are centering a fascinating book that we've just completed, Asian Americans in an Anti-Black World, by Professor Claire Jean Kim. And so I did not read every page. Let me just start with that. I read a lot of it, but I did bounce around a little bit. And so I thought I would be very much more interested in having you get us started and with a discussion and maybe pull out some of the broader points that and you're also more familiar with Kim's work. So yeah, but or anything, but so that's how I thought we would start this discussion, because again, that's what we're doing. These are sort of open air meetings we're having about our project. I forgot to make that point clear. So it's so yeah. But yeah, do you thoughts, or is that an okay way for us to start, or what did you how do you want to proceed?
I feel like I think we generally have a really good back and forth anyway. So if you feel to jump in as well, sorry, something's in my throat. But Let's see. So yeah, I'm familiar with her work because I just want to start off by saying I really recommend people reading her earlier work too,
Mm.
Bitter Fruit, which is so we've read the article, Racial Triangulation, that is pretty much a bedrock of this book in a way. Like that one was kind of like a 30-page um, theory and history of Asians and Black folks in this country and how they relate to each other. And this book that we just read just got published, I think, just a year ago, or a year or two
Yeah,
ago.
it's pretty new. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very new. Yeah, it's just I don't want to say just but it is a deepening of that earlier discourse that she did, and that was in 1999, the article. But Bitter Fruit is the book that published, I believe, in
yeah.
2000.
2023. This is it says to be
Oh wow,
published. It was published.
awesome.
So
Yeah, so
yeah,
so very recent. And then she wrote Bitter Fruit, and it got published in 2000. And that one is a huge thing for me as a qualitative scholar too, because she relies a lot on in-depth interviews of people on both sides or all sides as much as
right,
she could of the Red Apple boycott, which had a lot to do with black folks, a coalition of black folks, because it included Haitians and African Americans and other Caribbean folks, I think, fighting against what they saw was very real racism from Koreans, as they described, with Korean shop owners. And so she interviewed people from both sides of it. But in her interviews of that boycott, she, of course, exposed just how flimsy and superficial the media had portrayed these boycotts. Because for that moment, it was during David Dinkins' only term. The media, just like now, when it comes to Zionism, was portraying black folks as just inherently racist towards Koreans and just being jealous of their success and not really taking any of their concerns seriously, intentionally so, right? So that book I really, 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 really I'm wrapping up my chapter one of my dissertation. I did all the other chapters, but and I was just pulling a lot from her book then again. So it's a huge part of my qualitative research. There's another book she did called Dangerous Crossings, which I haven't read. I do have it, but I believe it's about race and food. But I haven't read that one. But yeah, she's a huge, huge inspiration for me as an Asian American scholar who takes anti-blackness very seriously, clearly. Um, but yeah, I guess the starting point for me, for anyone who hasn't read the book, is that this book is a very deep dive, and it is still pretty dense. So it's like over 300, around 360 pages, but it's very dense, and it took me a few weeks to get through. Um, and
my Kindle copy says 412 all told pages. It's
oh,
just
really?
for
Yeah,
whatever difference, whatever that means. But
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot here.
There's a
Yeah,
lot
sorry.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, no. Actually, speaking of that, what I mean by that too, I just landed on the page, but I wrote a lot of notes, like a lot
Hmm.
of random stuff. But this book is really just tackling how she feels that race. She feels that even with some Asian Americans who might be a bit more progressive, there's still an issue of not taking our social and political relation to Black folks not as seriously as she wants it to be. And it's material. Like she, for example, says she doesn't argue that Asian Americans are white adjacent. She's not for that. But she says it's very interesting. The term she uses is they're not white, but they're not black. So therefore, Asian Americans still get a bit of privilege from that. So she goes into
Right. She
three
says she
history.
it's that tension she talks about between it's not that right. Whites have said you're not white,
Right.
but the bigger thing is that you're also not black.
Right.
So
Right.
it's and she talks about the pull and push
Hmm.
from that. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, and that's the big core, that the not blackness needs to be elevated more. And she proves that with court cases, a ton of history, and some theoretical discussion. And I landed on an interesting page just about, like, just giving a lot of credit to the book. There's a lot in this book. Like, for example, on page 308, she talks about the Bandung conference. So when you were speaking, is just like it just landed on the page. So this is what we're talking about. She doesn't hold back in terms of like the expansive nature of this project. And she also goes as recent as the anti-Asian hate crimes during COVID. So to just to give people a sense of where the book, quote unquote, ends. And she correctly predicts, because in this book she is just getting into the more current anti-race affirmative action cases that were pushed by Ed Blum. She's just getting into that at the end, and she does correctly predict, because I think this book, like 2023, it was just published right before race and in affirmative action was, or whenever she wrote it, she wasn't yet at that point when it was completely hit down.
Correct.
So she predicts it, though, to her credit. She predicts it being knocked down.
And then she even says, basically, when it does get knocked down, here's what Asians can do to respond appropriately.
Right. Well, also, she does say Asian Americans are not a bystander in that. So she correctly points out that with this new phenomena, because initially with the anti-race, anti-black affirmative action stuff that they were fighting against, it was about white people being unfairly discriminated. It wasn't necessarily picking up the right kind of steam that these activists wanted. So that's why they pivoted much more strongly towards Asians being the plaintiffs in these cases. So she's saying it's also like, again, the not white but not black. So again, Asian Americans were not a bystander. At least East Asian weren't. East Asian, which she does say that's who she's focused on. But she does say that we're not a bystander, but we are literally the ones taking it down. So I think that's the thing that's so important about the text, is that she predicted it, and she also predicted the how. And I think that's really that's what I also took away from it, like just her insistence on that.
No, right on. So just so I know folks are still coming in. This is the book here, and that we're talking about today, and that Sudip just, I think, summarized very well, including some of the work previously of the author. This is another thing about what I'm learning a lot more about myself in my advancing age, about, and that is a flaw in my approach to people's work, is that I will often be reading them with a specific interest in mind. So, and I say that because just going back recently and rereading Du Bois's book on John Brown that I read years ago with a particular interest in mind, reading it with a different interest in mind, I'm seeing things differently, hearing things differently, remembering things differently. So I say all that to say that I read this book, I approached this book almost exclusively with our project in mind, and even more narrowly, my own work in mind. So almost everything that stood out to me was her, I think, brilliant infusion of public policy in showing how people end up where we all end up. So, and this, you know, and I'm saying this to say out loud, and you know, for the sake of our work, and just being honest and whatever, that this could lead. I have to be careful that I don't want my bias to improperly shape my reading of this, but those are where all my notes end up being. So once I was clear from how she explains her approach to the book, which you've outlined, and that anchors, as I think even she uses as a word, anti-blackness as the racial formation or foundation. All I kept seeing was how she said, even in the way that she cites Yik Wo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, as being referenced in Plessy, which I was like, damn.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that at all. And we can come back to maybe more properly explain what that is. But the point being that there's always this, Asians are not white, but you are at least not black. And from the perspective of white supremacy, we are going to continue to manipulate that reality
Mm-hmm.
through how we allow you to move into certain neighborhoods, how we allow you to move into certain sectors of the economy, like the laundry in San Francisco and elsewhere. I mean, in other words, this was very validating for what I've been looking for in approaching this project, which, because I keep wanting to say there is nothing magical about any particular group. People end up where they end up as a result of policy and what people in power want, as as best they can shape their society. And when we see all of these cases that Kim is talking about, there's so many cases, never mind the little policy disputes, there's so many like
Right.
major cases
Right.
involving, again, where can Asians be, how many Asians can there be, as
Mm-hmm.
long as they're not black,
Mm-hmm.
they can be. And as long as they're not black, but only in certain numbers, they can be. And then it was just, again, the only thing I regret or am disappointed in, it's not her fault, is that I would have wanted her to just do this specifically about business.
Yeah.
Because that's why I was scouring, because she has so many chapter breaks and sections. I was like, man, there's got to be one little section here where she just does the work I wanted to do for me. That's really what I'm saying. Like, just summarize it all for me,
Right.
so I can just say Kim pages this, that, and the third. But really, she's doing something much larger. But I'm saying for what I'm interested in, there's so much in here that is just clarifying for me. And there's even a line when she's talking about the Obadeli case in reparations, where she's saying, on the one hand, in Mario Badeli's case for reparations in Cobras was doomed to fail. And the point, specifically the case earlier in the 2000s, that, as she rightly points out, very few people talk about, where Obadeli is saying, if you're going to pay Japanese people something for 4 years of internment, my God, man, he's like 500 years of abuse to Africans. We have to be in line for something. And the court is saying no, because, to Kim's point, the Japanese are not black. And there's a line in there, I'll find it in a moment, where she says, like, where she comes as close to me of giving me the one line, because she's saying something to the effect, the one flaw in Obadeli's argument was that he's black. Like, and it's not to say that there's something wrong with black people.
Right.
She's pointing out that there's something wrong with how white people address themselves to black people, and then use Asians as this sort of go-between that then she comes back to rightly criticize in terms of how Asians engage or don't engage in that and third. But ultimately that's my point. So when black people are saying to other black people, let's do what the Jews did, let's do what the Asians do, let's do what this group did, this is another example of how you can't. Right. And it's not because there's something wrong with black people, it's because the structure is specifically targeting black people for hostilities. So that's why when trying to unlock the black freedom puzzle, the argument I would say has to involve many other things beyond do what the Asians did, because you can't. Anyway, so that's...
Well, I wrote down, like, how can black people, quote unquote, imitate Asian economics when black people aren't like Asian, aren't in the same situation as Asian, like, to flip that inversely. Like, that's the whole point. And I think I had a similar feeling too at times, where I was like, oh, if only, not in a bad way, because again, what she's done is incredible work, but more like because the Yikyu thing blew my mind. I understood that Asians have played a role or have been put into a role, and maybe in that sense also reinforced their role. I understand some of that with the LA uprisings. I understand that with the propaganda efforts following the murder of Aikai Gurley. But when she mentioned that in a time period when Plessy was happening, and in that case, they were just like, well, we're not racist because we did this other case of Yikwu. I was like, wait, so that was cited in a thing that that said racial apartheid and also what blew my mind then was also how Yikwu's case was about a certain kind of adherence to property rights, because then it was right after, the slew of cases that were coming in that was quote unquote about business, but really were about state laws circumventing federal laws, which would lead to Jim Crow being like, well, you can't have these kind of regulations, the federal government is doing too much. So in the midst of that, Yikuwu comes in, because the issue with the Yikuwu is that it was a racially inspired law. Let's just get, like, it was a racially inspired law in the state of California, which was very deeply anti-Asian for generations, that wanted to take down laundromats. It was true. And because a lot of the laundromats were done by Asian people, Chinese folks who had no other set of income. And they were doing these sort of like regulatory things that seemed good on paper. But as the Supreme Court rightly understood then, this was under strict scrutiny or something. It was having the result of harming of Chinese laundromat owners. And then one of the people who wrote that case said, "How can we even dare to attack a person's property rights?" Essentially, so entrepreneurialism for Asians was in a different place than the entrepreneurialism of Black folks, because in that case, Black folks were killed or lynched for starting supermarkets, maybe, or doing anything. So that just blew my mind too. The case itself was quite revelatory and quite stunning, because I did not understand how deep it went. Because when you're being cited in Plessy, that's when it takes a different level of I don't even know how to explain. Like, your mind is just warped by that.
Again, one, it reminded me of how often we reference or hear things that we don't actually read in detail. So I've never sat and actually read the full decision of Plessy, not that that's I can remember, of course. So that's why this could be news, and it's fascinating. And then I was also reminded, admittedly, somewhat take it a little bit personally, how Plessy is described as a shoemaker of mixed descent in proportion of 7/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African blood, and in whom the mixture of colored blood was not discernible. I said, damn. So I mean, I was like anyway, but and yet he becomes the standard for Blackness, in which there's reference to this Asian character who is being held up. I don't know. It was just, well, it was
also yeah. In that paradigm too, there was these cases that she talked about where, so in the Mississippi Delta, yeah, I mean, it goes to show they
love some fractions.
In the U.S., white people had developed such a racial quantum that even other countries of white people were like, this is too much. Like, you know what I mean? You at least have to have a grandfather or something to link you up. Not like a descendant of a descendant of a descendant of a descendant may have been African. We don't know. And how do you measure that? You don't measure that. So it's like, I don't even know. Like, it just reinforced that insanity. Like, we're having full on court cases where these white people are just like, well, technically the Caucasus Mountains are real, but you're not Caucasian. It was just, this is such a crazy place to have created, like a weird place to exist. But the other thing that was so fascinating was she mentioned how when there were some instances, like in the Mississippi Delta, at least, and some parts of San Fran where Asians were not allowed to go with white kids, it was because it was the fear of Black kids then being allowed.
Right.
The slippery slope. So
yeah. It's like you're going to start with an Asian and end up with Black. It's like, don't smoke that little bit of, because then you'll be a full-blown.
It's crazy because it's Cali in the 80s. There weren't that many African Americans, so the obsession with Blackness was like so intense and crazy and foundational, which she's correct. Where they were just like, well, it was Israeli coded in some sense. Like, even with like, there's the fear of a thing that would happen to you that you've done to them. Like, there's also the case of Soon, what's her name? The Stoner woman.
Yeah.
I knew some of the, because I was fairly young when this happened. I learned a little bit about it growing up, sort of, because those same tensions existed in New York City. But I didn't understand the intensity of how she even, like, even the ladies. So this is a Korean store owner woman who killed a little black girl, Latasha Harlins,
Mm-hmm.
who was
Mm-hmm.
I did not know this. I knew something was up, but I did not know that the dollars that she was going to pay for the juice that she allegedly stole, which was not
Mm-hmm.
true, was crumpled in their hand. That's like a
Yeah.
detail. That's
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I
No,
didn't know that.
that part, yeah. So that part
Right.
I remember. Oh wait, I didn't mean to do that. The the not blackness. So, and I like how she's, that is Kim subtitles a lot of these when she's talking about an Asian subject. The not blackness of Soon John Jadu, who was the store owner who shoots and kills Latasha Harlins and Harlan, and that was a fact that. So I was of a relatively appropriate age where this, I was in the Navy when this happened. I was already like in this emerging consciousness around race and in this cauldron of hostilities, of racial hostilities, which is how I remember my time in the military. So when this story happened, I was locked in.
Hmm.
And then for years this has been discussed and referenced. So and all that to say that I absolutely remember
Hmm.
that she was not stealing anything, and that she did have that crumpled up money, and that was part of the whole. Um, yeah. But on March 16th, 1991, 2 weeks after the beating of Rodney King by LAPD officers, ninth grader Latasha Harlins, who was black, walked into the Empire liquor stores in Compton to buy some orange juice. She took a carton of orange juice that cost $1.79 out of the refrigerator, stuck it in the top of her backpack, and approached the counter with $2 bills in her hand. And then it proceeds from there.
But what
And
is
then that was
wild?
one of the early, that was also one of the early cases, as I remember it, that was on tape. Because
Oh, I didn't know that.
the security camera had that on tape. So there's footage of it. You could see, and then this was meticulously dissected over the years because you could see the point, because whatever claims were attempted at the beginning, you can see on tape that Latasha has, I think, threw the money at her, maybe, or there was something like there was hostility, and she was given, she was like, Latasha was saying, like there was some exchange of hostilities, and but you can see that she's walking out.
Yeah.
So her back is turned. She's already thrown the money. This is clearly not a robbery. There was zero reason other than there was no reason to, other than the anti-blackness that Kim is talking about, as far as I could tell, for the shooting. But yeah, it was so but yeah.
Well, I just
Yeah.
because the I didn't know that. But either way, reading that was tough. But also, the hatred of black folks was so strong with this Korean woman that the lawyers told her to shut up, because she was like, in a phobic, like, she was like, listen, these black people, they're lazy and they don't work and all that. And then the lawyers like, you gotta shut. Even some of the other people were like, oh my god, why are you saying this? And then, but the thing is, like, it didn't matter, because she was also able to personify and argue a point of like, well, if I didn't do, well, she said, which is all lies, she said, I don't remember doing it, because she was such a fugue
Right.
state. And
Right.
even the doc, I mean, I just want to give credit to the other people too, because there are other people who weren't just buying into this. Other people, like, she was pretending to, like, or whatever the case may be, she was like the one that's actually hurt, and she's like at the hospital, like tossing and turning, but nothing happened to her. Nothing happened to her. And then later on, she argued that if she wasn't the one to do this, Latasha and everybody else, all black folks, would have been the ones to do it to them. And I thought, I wrote that as like so Israeli coded, like such
Yeah.
an
Wow.
Israeli thing to think, like, if, because they do say it nowadays, they saying like, well, in the end, we're caught up in the war, we're all caught up in this war that they started, like in terms of the region.
Right,
But then
right.
they also say, well, the best thing to do now is just to end it, because if we allow the Arabs to even get a modicum
A
of
foothold, they'll do it to us.
right, which is a projection of everything, because it's like, okay, well, to
Mhm.
be really quite honest with you, like, you did start this, like, you actually did do, you just massacred all these children's families. So in my that's what I wrote down. Like, I couldn't get my mind, like, to what you're saying about the economic side, I couldn't get away from the Israeli Zionist side of this thing too.
Mm.
Like, just like how these things are so woven together in a certain way. Like, she was literally in the affidavits or whatever you want to call it, like saying things that were just, you could hear in these interviews that people do of Israeli folks in Tel Aviv being like, I think I saw a video the other day of an Israeli woman said, just drop an atomic bomb, just do it, because and I'm sure in her mind she's like, well, they're gonna do something to me. But it's also like, the fact of the matter is, for a Korean American store owner or anybody who's Asian or whatever, if I'm not saying the customer base is always right, but if there is a level of distress that you're feeling, sometimes you do need to ask yourself, um, what am I doing to contribute to that feeling? And I think that's what Clear Jin Kim is trying to also argue in terms of
Yeah.
like broader Asian Americanness. And sorry, there's like an echo happening in the background there. I don't know if that's me or
Oh, I don't hear it.
I hear it on my end, but let me see. Oh, it's clear. Wait, no, I can hear it.
So when I mute, do you hear it?
Hello? No, I'm good. Yeah.
But do you hear it now?
Hello? Yeah, I hear it now.
I don't know. I have headphones on too, so I don't understand where
Just
that would
figure
be
it out.
coming from. Did it just start?
It started like maybe 10 minutes ago when we started early. Yeah.
Because nothing in terms of settings has changed over here.
That's bizarre.
I
Well,
don't know what's.
if it's getting worse, I'll tell you. But right now, it's I think manageable.
And the chat is saying they don't hear it,
It's on my
which
end,
is
I
a good
think.
sign. So,
It's on my end.
so all right, so part of to that. So in part, as I'm hearing your point there, one of the things that it does make me think about is that one that the Israeli piece is, I'm trying to think of how I would frame the similarity. But anyway, but the point I'm hearing is that and this is what I keep hearing, even as I watched this Mehdi Hassan Alan Dershowitz debate the other day, yesterday or earlier today, which was just, it's an acknowledgement that we have done something so horrible that we do expect that a logical reaction would be that they would want to do something similar to us. So therefore, we can never stop. We can never seek peace, forgiveness. We can never apologize. We'll never trust them, nor should we, because they would never. I wouldn't. They shouldn't trust me if they did this to me. So we might as well just wipe them all the way out. And I can't come up with the whatever the parallel I was looking for. So I'll just stop there. But the other thing that I do think about in terms of the killing of Latasha Harlan is that part of what I do want to address with this project and beyond is that after the emotions, for instance, of rereading this story of the killing of this young girl, once I get over, or to the extent it's possible to get over the anger, the emotion, whatever, trying to look at as objectively as possible the conditions that put these two people in this relationship. So to your point, and maybe to Kim's a little bit, is let's look at the structure that put various communities in various relationships to one another with as I think she documents very well, a clear inducement by the white settler colonial elite to have this play out. I mean, I've always thought a version of this, but I mean, it seems, just reading again in the context of Kim's book, that from their perspective, the killing of Latasha Harlan and the response and all of that other it was just perfect. Because it allows for everybody to do what I keep struggling against, whether it's in this context or the Black and Jews context or whatever. But it allows for a complete erasure of all of the history and the policy that has a Korean community in that part of LA, with that limitation put on them in terms of the business opportunities, the economic conditions, even the attempts to prevent. I know this was in a different time and and community, but the establishment of little Tokyos by making sure that only a handful of Japanese can show up in this part and a handful of Koreans can show up over here and a handful of this group over here, and then loving that white liberal woman writing, I think in the 40s, where she's saying, man, some of these Japanese have this real hostility to Black folks.
Oh,
I hope they can get over it before it's too late, because the Black community is the only community in this country that they're likely to find some peace from. And then to flash forward after 50 more years of public policy and racist projection and inducements from white settlers and punishments against anti-Black punishment, and then you end up with this woman who is put in a situation where she can only experience hostility and vice versa from that immediate Black community. And then, of course, she's going to feel like it's logically justifiable to shoot this girl in the back of the head. And then, of course, she's going to get off. So that's what that's what I really like about this book, is that if we can all, this is going to sound very liberal, but if we can all just step back for a moment and just look at the situation, we might realize that, again, part of the argument I would want to make is that we'll see a little more clearly how there is a hustle being played here. Lastly, though, I do just want to say quickly, I very much am glad that she does, that is Kim, repeatedly point out that Asians have to stop accepting the invitation to whiteness.
Yes, that's the thing. That's the thing that makes it a little bit different.
Yeah.
She's not arguing that. Well, I do want to raise. There are some things that I would like to bring up later, because I think there's a lot of the book that we still need to praise, because it is a very, it's doing a lot. Like, I feel like it's one of the few texts I've seen that's this blunt. I mean, the title itself is very blunt, and also extremely blunt with its final analyses too. Saying like what you said, which is stop accepting the invitation, maybe not to whiteness, but stop accepting the invitation to being not white and not Black. At least to that extent, right? Because again, some Asians are still useful to white people as being Asian.
Right.
You're not white, so therefore I can be your friend. And when something good happens to you, it's a not white person doing it. So I think she's saying, stay in that moment. Because I think some of her criticisms of some progressive Asians has been, there's always this. Also, she's against the idea of complete analogy, which is sometimes a habit for people who say like Asians or Latinos, we're in struggle with our Black and brown brothers and sisters and comrades because we face such and such. She's not saying to stop it, but she's saying curtail it. Try to just go with, this happened to Black folks because this is very specific to Black folks.
Right.
And therefore we need to stand up for Black folks and stand with them, and those kind of things. So I think that's what's different and more important about this text than maybe other texts. I can't quite remember, but I haven't really read a text like this in a while, let's just say. But I do have some, because she's just a hero of mine. I've interviewed her before, and she's a really amazing person. Like, she's up there for me. But I do have some maybe like things I want to go into as gaps, or things that I found a little bit, just have some questions, not anything super, in a way. But some parts, like for example.
Yeah, let's go. We've been nice enough. Let's go. No, I'm just playing.
Oh, no, okay. I was about to, I was scared.
No,
I was like, no, okay. I was like, no. Claire Jean Kim is like a hero. I just want to say, like, I have all intents to one day at these conferences meet her and thank her for this book. Like, I think it's so vital. But yeah, You start off like you put a ding ding like a ring,
Like,
ding,
yeah, like,
and then there's a
okay,
third,
enough of that. Enough of all the niceties.
and then
No,
there's
I'm just kidding.
a third window slowly creeps up.
Yeah.
It's Doctor Kid. I had no clue at all.
Oh,
I
that
would
would be
just,
wild.
oh my
And
god, I would be like, I'd actually kind of be like, this is kind of like not on brand, but I love how it's on brand for YouTube. So let's do it. Let's just have
no,
a debate. 'Cause I know you
I
wouldn't, but
would
you
never
feel
do that to somebody. That
no,
would
I
be,
know. Your
yeah,
idea of it, even with the videos about other folks, you always talk about like I would like to be having a real sensible discussion prepared for. But I think in
yeah.
YouTube land, debate culture, it would be funny one day if it's like, hey, by the way,
And by the
here
way,
she
here she
comes.
is.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh,
And if she
I'm,
came in like, what now? Like, what?
I
I don't even know
interviewed.
what she looks like. I don't have no concept of what this.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just picturing. Now I'm just picturing her just coming in like, "What
yeah.
now, Sudeep?"
Oh my, I would be crying actually. I was like, no, no, you don't understand. I didn't mean it. And then it's like, like, oh my God, I'd be so embarrassed. Like, um, no, but but to staying with the LA uprising part too, because what's
Yeah.
really fascinating is how there are certain economic motifs in the book, like Yikwu is connected to the store owner, which is connected to also immediately how the LA uprising is dealt with. Like I've had my students. So there's a great piece. I forgot the writer's name. I can't. Gayatri Bahadur. She's from Jersey City originally. She is Indo-Guyanese American. She wrote this really great piece in the Boston Review about hate crimes that were happening with Indians in Jersey City. I don't know if you were aware, but like in the late 80s, there was a series of really vicious hate crimes against Indians or people who looked Indian in the city. Like vicious, like I think at one point they even entered a man's home and beat him to death. Like it's called
Damn.
the Dot Busters. So I knew about it growing up. That's how violent. Like my parents would be like, just wow, the Dot Busters, because they also sent a note to the Jersey Journal, which I used to write for. They wrote a note back in the day, almost like claiming themselves like a bizarro version of a manifesto, right? So they were just like, we're here, we're the Dot Busters, we're here to clean up our streets. So it was that violent, that open. But she wrote in her piece how she tackled that and wanted to talk about solidarity, but she begins her piece rightfully with also Pat Buchanan's culture war speech from 92 or 94, 92. And she's like Kim. She basically said her analysis is the same. Like in the end, it's really also about anti-blackness in a speech. And what I remember is because I also went into a speech and read some of it and had my students go through it with me to an extent. And Koreans are cited in the speech. Like he goes off in this little like flowery like to the miners of a certain town that we all know was very white because he went there or something to another place that's very white, and then he just dropped in the store owners or the Koreans in L.A. So I pulled up a picture of the famous image of the Korean store owners up on the rooftops with the snipers or the guns, right? And I said to my students, what would appeal to someone like Pat Buchanan about this image or about these people? And we got through it. We got through in the fact that they had guns for sure, that they were doing what? Protecting property, a certain kind of property. But also it matters on who they're shooting at. So it matters on who they think they're shooting at too, which goes into this one documentary she also puts to task, which I'm glad she did. But the entrepreneurialism is there, the sense of like the right kind, because there is still a good Asian and a bad Asian, right? There's still a good Asian, bad Asian, but the good Asian has not just anti-blackness on their side, a particular form of property rights on their side, entrepreneurialism on their side, and frankly, for those Korean men, there's a reason why those South Korean men had training with guns, because they were in the military in South Korea. So they brought that over with them. So there's a lot of material circumstance in that sense. And again, I didn't know a lot about the documentaries, because one thing I'll say, I do get annoyed when I see the stories about the LA uprising. I'm not Korean, but I see the stories about the LA uprisings, even if they're well-meaning, and they land on this certain kind of quest to also unearth the unfairness of what happened to Korean American. I keep saying store owners because that's important to me. Store owners. And I get sometimes annoyed because it's like, okay, I get it. It was fucked up. Sorry, it was messed up. But also, Pat Buchanan lifted this community for a reason. And even though the stores were, and it sucks to lose a store. I'm not arguing to lose your shit is like, if someone burned my shit, I wouldn't just stand aside, but well, this is, part of the structural racism of the world. I'm not going to be like, hey, someone's running in and out of my store. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be standing there like, well, if you need help carrying it, I'll help you. Like, I'd be like, kind of upset. But
let me assess this dialectically and
as a store owner. Like, why am I a store owner in the first place if I'm doing this? Like, but the thing is, the reckoning of it though needs to change. There's a way of dealing with the moment that's quite human, anger, frustration. But then what she's saying is that the reckoning of it is also not peak. It's not at the right level, because there's a documentary where she says the documentary by this Korean American, I believe, was about, it was not like pro cop, it was like liberal coded, but the documentary was about the lone Asian guy, the lone Korean guy who got shot by another Korean American store owner. It was part of her book. It was right after, I think, the discussion about this woman. So she was saying that even after the LA uprisings, there was an attempt to reckon with what happened. And of course, there's like the whole feeling of some Korean Americans of the era being lost because they saw the cops draw down and pull back, which was true. They allowed certain neighborhoods to be burned. That was true. That's structural. But what she was frustrated by, and what I was frustrated by learning about this one documentary, and I'll find it as you're discussing too. I think it's Sa Aigu. It was still like insane because the story was like just about the LA Korean American store owners, and then it was about the lone Korean American, which is still a condemnation of the store owners having guns. I get that, but it was about the lone Korean American who was shot by a store owner mistakenly because they thought he was a robber. So she was right. So Claire Jean Kim. So again, this book is court analysis, movie analysis, history. So this is in the book, and she's basically taking to task this book because of the mythology that's coming from a liberal perspective, which I like. I mean, she tackles the extreme racism and white supremacy of the earlier cases of like Plessy, but she goes into this really useful discussion and disentangling of liberal stuff, right? Like, this is a liberal documentary that's not suggesting that there is no racism. Again, not anti-blackness, but racism against black people. But she's arguing that these movies also still fall short of what's necessary. Because yes, maybe through your tale of the lone Korean American, you can suggest that this is all fucked up and the Korean American guy should not have been shooting so willy-nilly. But that's the one Asian guy, like that's sad, but why are you focused on him? Because there's still an implication like it shouldn't have been him. Or it's like, what about like all the other black folks, Latino folks, and other Asians? By the way, this is the other interesting thing. There were a ton of Asians in the uprisings. A lot of them were Southeast Asians who were also in gangs and messed up and fucked up over the refugee policy. And they're like, I came to America. I was dropped into a shitty place. Why? I want to get stuff. So there is this other story that could have been told.
Sudip, so this is the silliness I'm talking about. So in the performance, so forgive me for interrupting ourselves with this. So at the very beginning, so I know Detroit Showtime is wild late and coming in wild loud and ignorant. But at the very beginning of the show, we explained what's going on. We explained our relative lack of relevance. We invited people to go to other streams, to go elsewhere. We recognized our relative lack of importance in this moment. So you're making a silly, disingenuous intervention that I'm admittedly falling for. I'm falling for the rage bait. But the point is that it's also performative in the sense that you didn't even have to be here to say this. Like, you could have just left and gone on to something more important, but you took all the time to write that long ass comment. And then so we get it. We're not presenting this as the most important thing happening in the world right now or the most important analysis, and we're admitting this is part of our ongoing public sharing of our meetings for a project we're working on. So so feel free to find something more important. The YouTube space is literally, I think, infinite at this point. so
that's
please.
An interesting. Well, also
now it is also true that I do find this to be very much connected, but I'm just saying, if we're not hitting the levels that you need, I get it. I'm not mad, but just go ahead on. All right, my bad, Sudip, and everybody else. That's my fault. That's my fault.
No, but I saw that. I didn't see that. No. I also wanted to correct to say, we mean like World War III, because he says on the verge of World War II. We had World War II.
Did he say World War II?
I think so. So I'm just saying I'm not trying to be me. I'm just saying I actually sympathize. I get what he's trying to say, and I will connect it. trust me, I will connect it. But technically, it's World War III. Technically, it's World
He
War
did,
III.
he did say
Yeah. So I
we're
don't
on the
know
verge of World War
why.
II.
I don't know why I was like, well, it was fought in Asia, which is actually in the book. So we will get to that. So if you want to do that, we can do it. But World War III is where it's going to happen.
Right, right,
So I just want to be honest. And
right.
honestly, I will pull it in there. I will say, like, I will connect the dots because I do have like, okay, I'll be honest with you.
You did already mention the Israeli
Yeah,
overlap.
I
Like
did. I did. I
the
did. I
reading.
did
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah.
and again, that is why there is no inside or outside war. It is all interconnected. The same men who tortured the Viet Cong said the same exact thing as they tortured black men in Chicago. The same dudes who tortured people in Guantanamo is the same folks who again tortured black and native folks in the domestic space. So all this is
Right.
connected. So, but I just wanted to just say correction. It's World War III. I'm actually not trying to be like, I just was like, I don't know.
No, I would have
Yeah.
been way more petty with it. I wish I had noticed that. I would have called that out from the beginning. That's perfect. But anyway, that's
Yeah, that's all I had
hilarious.
to say about
That's
that because
hilarious.
I was reading, I was like, I don't know. I thought I thought World War II happened. I
Well,
didn't know.
you know how people are with movies. The sequel usually gets less, is
Yeah,
rarely considered
yeah.
as much as. So he just skipped the sequel and he just
Well, you
acted like
skipped
there
the
wasn't.
original. World War One was kind of useless, I guess, and it was like, let's just go
Well, I
straight
mean, he
to
was just saying it wasn't, World War II. I don't acknowledge that. I don't acknowledge that war.
Right. Endgame Avengers didn't really happen. We just went straight to all these like Marvel
It's
spin-offs
it's a
instead.
different timeline.
Yeah.
It's a different
It's
universe.
a different, yeah. Well, they are trying to do a multiverse, so maybe we're always perpetually in World War II.
Boom.
In some sense, we are caught up in the Cold War 2.0, 3.0 all the time. So that could be a thing.
Which Kim talks about. And in fact, Kim talks about
Yes.
how I'll get to the specific case in a minute. I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but she talks about how there was a specific case where the Asian complainant used the fact of the Cold War to make their case for why they should be given some
Right.
I have to find the specifics, but I know that point was made in the book that it's specifically presented to say, listen, you don't want me and the rest of China going to the communists, so so go ahead and let me set up my little business and then you don't have to worry. But like that really was how it was kind of framed.
It's ridiculous when you hear how it's
know,
like
it's
this
like,
one guy is like just doing a tax code or some shit. It's like,
listen,
oh my god,
listen. Me and all of China, you know what I'm saying? Let me set up my business or we might slide over to the continent.
How would you do that too? Like you would just call, yeah, I'm sure Mao was like at the phone, bated breath, like, oh, I need to make sure that, so-and-so is going to call me and say what happened in Supreme Court. That's going to change everything for me, which also shows the gap in aspirations with some Asian Americans versus their compadres and peers who are fighting a real war. A real systemic war. Like right. Mao doesn't give a shit. Like Mao correctly is like, what? Like, what if someone did say to him, somebody in San Fran now can open a second laundromat? And he's like, what? Like what? He's like sitting at the table with Japanese forces and troops like putting it, and he's like, what? Like he looks like, what are you talking about?
That's see, people always they leave that out of the footnotes. If you read deep into Mao's footnotes.
Yes.
At the end of the end of combat liberalism is this line about, but unless they offer you a laundromat.
Right. Unless they offer you a laundromat, a really cool movie, maybe a couple of really nice, restaurants here and there. Like that's the footnote. Combat liberalism footnote. But maybe ... I will write the next one later. And he never got to it.
Didn't quite get to it.
Oh my God.
But oh man, I do have to find that exact part that I was thinking of. But the
cold is really important because like that is something that's highlighted in a lot of other Asian work too. Like I keep highlighting this book because I have my students read it. It's called, I've said this so many times, but I really want people to read this book. I think it is actually the best book I've read on Asian American history. It's The Making of Asian America by Erica Lee. There's also a young adult version that
Mm,
my girlfriend has read for her students, and it's really really good. Like I think it does a great job. It's not like super radical, but it does cite. There's a chapter called "Good Asian, Bad Asian," and it has a lot to do with the Cold War and how even if you do that though, like as we know, it's still not enough sometimes. Like there was still a lot of Chinese folks in Chinatown. Because the thing I keep telling my students too, the changeover from the hot war of World War II to the Cold War happened almost instantaneously. It happened through World War II because a lot of America and Italy, not Italy, America and England were like, fuck, I don't should we work with the Soviets? We kind of want them to lose. Like that was not like they weren't like best buddies until 19 at least with FDR 1934 because he needed a re-election. But then, even after World War II ended, the next Democrat was like, all right, back to business. Let's
mm,
let's chop these colonies up even further. All that to say, a lot of Chinese people, Chinese Americans, were big funders. They were members of the Communist Party because they were not only impressed, they were filled with pride that there was a movement in China that was finally ending the 100+ years of humiliation, and they were actually encouraged by the United States to be chill with it because there was a discourse that was different, and then overnight, overnight, it's like, remember that poem you wrote, speaking lovely things about Mao? Why did you write that? You're just under a glaring light. You're just like this sweating poet. Like this happened, and they're like, "What are you talking about? I thought you guys said that was fine." So even if you are that one dude, it's going to be specific. It's just going to be about you as an entrepreneur, maybe, or just
exactly.
as a conservative. This is where politics. Maybe you just are anti-communist. You don't give a shit about other Chinese Americans, let alone Chinese folks. So I just wanted to cite that. That still happened. Like there was tons of Red Scare that was on the bodies of Asians. Like Asian Americans were enemy number one for a long time when it came, or Asians, for the Cold War. Korea, Vietnam, like
Mm,
Laos, Cambodia, and before that, China. Once China became, I think, communist in 1949, it was open season on Chinese Americans and their so-called loyalty. So in Erica Lee's book, I just want to say she has a full chapter on this. Again, she's liberal, but she's extremely good at being a historian. I know it sounds kind of very like paternal. Like she's a hero of mine too. She writes an incredible chapter detailing that history, and that's why I also want to raise those books too, because they do talk about it, and they also talk about how certain Asian American activists of a more privileged background were very willing to sell out other Asian Americans who were, quite honestly, like proud of this new communist, and I may add, anti-colonial thing that was going down. It wasn't just like communism. It was like, oh, you're giving us dignity. You're giving us an honest chance. You're making the Japanese suffer and the Dutch suffer. Like why not? So I want to also raise Bengali Harlem by Vivek Bal. It is about Bengali people who built relationships with Black folks in LA and New York City. But in that book, he does mention, I think in the intro, because I read a while ago, I got obsessed with the book. And because of the location of the places he's talking about. And of course, I'm Bengali, so I was like, this is really cool. But he does mention after a while, like there was South Asian activists who used the same kind of talking, but the Cold War is there, blah, blah, blah. It didn't really work completely with India because India did align with the Soviets eventually because of real things. Like I think JFK said to India, because people forget this, India and Pakistan and later on Bangladesh, which split from Pakistan. Yes, the English left, but people forget the Portuguese stayed in Goa until I think the early 50s. So they just stayed in this little Goa.
mm.
And India under Nehru, who was not a communist, but was like a social dem, he, I think, asked JFK for diplomatic support if they were going to invade and finally take it back, because the Portuguese were not leaving. Because if you know, if a lot of your audience know, they were fascists. Like they were crazy and they were supported by NATO. So that made India was like, wait a minute, you JFK, you keep talking these great things. Why can't you just let us get our colony? So it didn't work that well with Indians. But I just want to say, even in that book by Bengali Harlem, he does mention the Cold War politics affecting how later on Indians and South Asians were finally able to achieve some modicum of rights. So the Cold War is such a epic vortex, pulling people in for bad reasons and also maybe spitting them out in good ways too, for those who took advantage of it at least.
No, that's fascinating, and it makes sense also because it was always sort of, I think, taken just it was often said that the Portuguese had an ego thing relative to the rest of Europe and needed to hold on to their colonies more than anyone else, and therefore fought viciously to like the last of it. They were among the last to give up their colonies.
They were psychologically embedded with, because all they got left was their colonies. They were not like Amilcar Cabral wrote about this. He analyzed them. He said Portugal is poor. Like he said, like the vast majority can't read. They can't do anything. And Portugal was poor. They were not even set up themselves for the next era of capitalism. Like London now is the finance capital.
Right.
They were like, oh, we want to keep Kenya. And then they were like, oh, we shouldn't because the Mau Mau was killing them. But they were able to evolve. The irony is Portugal became not a neo-colony, but became a side hustle for them because a lot of the companies that worked in Portugal were London controlled. So like, that was all we got.
That's why they went after Cabral like that, because Cabral was like, how dare inferior whites, even like the lesser whites are colonizing us? How we don't even get like the top whites. And he was like, this is unacceptable. And the Portuguese was like, no, we definitely got to get rid of Cabral for that. That's crazy.
And it didn't succeed for a long time either. To his
no,
credit.
Of course.
By the time they murdered him, he had already won over, I think, 2/3 of Guinea-Bissau.
And never mind the world. Like he had a lot of global support.
He was still touring.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like he was shamed in there. It's just they. But just quickly, this is the section I was talking about. Okay. This Sing Shang case seemed to exemplify these dynamics. Shang, a Chinese American, bought a home in Southwood, a white neighborhood in San Francisco. When he learned of his neighbor's objections, he asked Southwood to hold a formal vote on whether to allow him into the neighborhood. In a letter to the residents, Shang made his case in Cold War terms, referencing the present world conflict between communism and democracy. So they which I just took to mean that, he's I just was making a joke. Like, listen, let me move into your neighborhood or we're going to become communists. I'm going to call Mao and I got Mao on the other line. And he said, let my man sing in the neighborhood or it's going to be a problem. And it
wasn't even that serious. It was just, I forgot the context of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't even that serious.
Like it's
just one guy moving into a neighborhood.
Even more to your point. Like the whole Cold War for him was like, I got to get into this white neighborhood.
Right. It wasn't even about like let others go or access to things. Like
there was no we in there. There was nothing. It was like, I got to get in there.
Or
else I'm me and billions of Chinese are gonna go become communists.
He probably did scare the white people because they're in their racism. They probably did think they're all like a hive mind.
Like, of course.
Tap my head twice, and then Mao's gonna be like, "Oh, I feel a disturbance," and then he's gonna send the army in or something.
So it's funny you said that because I don't want to get sidetracked, and I'm not making an attempt in an actual look. I just watched a few episodes of that Pluribus show. And I said, this is their fear. But I made a kind of similar joke. I like in my mind, I was thinking, because this involves the hive mind and the alien takeover and all that. I'm sure something else is happening, but I'm really limited by what I consider to be a racialized trauma. And so I just see this in terms of this is white folks trying to reconcile their relative low numbers, racially speaking. And then even when they include Latinos and other members of the global community, I'm still thinking this is really about white, non-white versus human, non-human. But I may be wrong. But my point is the hive mind thing made me think of it. And I was like, everybody... and no, a lot of people like the show. I'm not even saying I didn't like the show. I'm just saying I actually don't know what I thought of the show. It was just kind of on. Maybe it was just, I don't know. Maybe I didn't like it that much.
But that's something I've heard from other people too. On the dividing line, I've heard some people say it's a critique of a certain kind of neoliberalism that exists in the collective trauma of like American patriotism. But I've heard the other side too. You know what I do with shows? I don't watch them. I just learn everything about them. So I actually know a lot about
I think it's better that way. For the most part, I think it's better that I do that with a lot of other shows too. I actually think it's better that way because I don't it saves time, and the discussion is usually better than the show itself.
I agree. I think sometimes you get back to the show, you're like, when you try, you're like, oh, that doesn't. I thought there
Look,
was
I
more
was only,
here.
to be real, I only tuned in because the lead actress was in Better Call Saul, which I think
Right.
is maybe one of my favorite shows of all time.
Oh,
So I really like that show. So there's no good reason for it. I'm not advocating for it. I'm not making a logical. It's just I just like it, and that's it.
but
But
Jared, we got to move on because like World War II
yeah, it's
is
because
about
World
to
War
start.
II is about to get kicked off.
So we can't do this. We have to
So
focus on everything.
yeah, it's a Vince Gilligan show, right? And Rhea Seehorn, I think is her name, is the lead, and I really liked her in Better Call Saul. So I watched Pluribus, and I just thought, to your point, that from their perspective, everybody has a hive mind.
Yeah,
And if you just if this one Chinese man,
just
taps his head real quick,
Yeah.
all of China is going to go to communism.
What's the
So let him move in.
All these movies in the 80s, I know the Matume and Jared Ware doing the Imperial 80s.
Oh,
Like a
man.
lot of the movies, like what's that one with the werewolves, or the wolves unite? What's that thing where they fight North Korea or Cuba invading and Soviets? What's that movie called?
Michigan. Red Dawn.
Yeah, like it's the same. Like there's
Yeah.
always been a trope for Asians though of being hordes. Like that's the
Right.
term they use. They're like, there'll be a horde of Asians coming. So it's like I'm pretty sure he knew that. I just find it kind of both mystifying that he just focused on himself. I forgot that little sliver because I was like, oh damn, he just wants to move
I just want to get
in.
in the house. So he's doing what we're being accused of. He's looking at this whole global Cold War, and he's like, I don't care about all that. I just need to get into this neighborhood.
I just need the keys. I need to
the keys.
I need to get the cable in. I need to do that day-to-day stuff.
But kind of to that point, this is something I really do like about what Kim's book is doing, though. Not to get back onto the niceties, but or to, I actually don't really have any serious critiques. Maybe because of that narrow focus that I had when reading, but what I do, because I keep coming back to what I like, that she is disaggregating that Asian horde by again showing how Koreans have ended up here in certain numbers and because of very specific histories and policies. That Chinese communities have ended up here, and I would love. I would love for her to have done more on this particular point. But Chinese communities have ended up in these communities because of. At one point, and I can't remember which, I have to go back and find the note, but she's talking about, I think in Chicago maybe, but she's talking about how, again, I mentioned that there were explicit efforts in terms of policy to limit little Tokyos in terms of Japanese populations. But then there were even more specific, it got even more specific, I think in Chicago, as it related to, I forget which Asian community, but the point was, we don't want it to be black. So, the Asians didn't want to move into black communities.
Right.
And they had carried with them a lot of anti-blackness that they had picked up either pre-migration. I don't know to what extent it existed before. They certainly had the flames fanned here. And then, but my point is that what Kim is showing is that even very explicit, specifically, she's saying like all the covenants that whites had in their lease agreements that you can't sell to black people only got applied to, or you can't sell to non-whites, I think was more how it was written.
Yeah.
But then it was only applied to black people. So that's how a few Asians could get over here, and a few Asians could get over here, and a few Asian businesses could get over here. And my point, though, is that in terms of my focus, is that when certain black pundits want to just say black people should blanketly do what Asians blanketly have done, all of these histories get wiped out, and all of the reasons why black communities can't and have not been allowed to do that. That's the other part. It's not that just that black people can't do it today. Right. There's a long history of black people being prevented from doing all of these things. Whatever people say should be done: business, dollar circulation, investment, stock, housing, pick it. Black people have been specifically targeted for exclusion.
Right.
And then only segments of Asians for very specific reasons, including, was it in this book or was it something else I was reading that was talking specifically about you can only come here to do business?
No, I think that's this book also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like there's a specific inducement to just allow Asian businesses to come over here. So it's like, anyway, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that's the thing with the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. The vast majority of Chinese folks weren't allowed to come because the vast majority were laborers. But there was a footnote to it where diplomats, son of diplomats or something, and then people who are studying here, just much like today, or I guess that's changing because of Trump, but usually people who can study here for higher degrees. I mean, that's also a trap because they do get very privileged people to come in, but they also ask them to pay a lot of thousands of dollars to take classes, which is insane, but they were still privileged. But then there was also this little other place for businesses, which is kind of like interesting because that is a holdover to today when it came to like certain Venezuelans or Cubans or people who wanted to get citizenship or some sort of green card status. You can come here and pay like a couple $1,000s to earn that, like leapfrog over people. That's still a thing today. And I think Trump wants to expand on it. So again, there are these through lines that are there. That's the other interesting thing, is that her book is quite relevant. I know she knows it because she's writing with the sense of the affirmative action cases with race. I always keep saying with race. And may I add too, I have heard sometime the obsession over race, I mean, people don't say race, but they just say affirmative action, like, because you can do gender there still. It's still a component, and you can do class, technically, what that means. But race is off now because of what's happened, right? With the Harvard case and things. Now you can't use any kind of racial whatever to discuss how many students you want or who you want, which is destroyed, been ended because of Asians playing that role. But what's interesting, I still hear people bring it up and I have to correct them, which is like this obsession, like what she used the term is seasoned. I think she said seasoned. You're seasoned into anti-blackness, you're seasoned into racism. And that's true. It's so bad sometimes that people don't even keep up with the news they claim to care about. Like I had to tell somebody, affirmative action, the way you describe it, is over. They're like, what? I was like, it's done. It's like 2 years ago. Like, why are you still upset? Why are you still on this? Like, what?
Because they assume that everything going wrong in their life is because of that. Right. And then when you tell them that, then they have to come to this realization, oh, wait a minute, damn, that had nothing to do with what I'm going through.
and all their projection is on black folks,
of course,
who they take personally. Like, what if you do meet, like I've met a range of people of all different types. Some people who could be like really nice, some people who are not. But I've been taught to, hopefully I've been able to keep that up, where it's not about the personhood. These are policies. But there are instances where I can feel someone like had a bad day with someone who might be African-American or Latino or other Asian. And then they start to, the society lets them ruminate on it like so much. And then the affirmative action thing is like, I don't want this person to go in because they're not qualified. It's like, bro, you're not qualified. You have no idea what's going on. You don't even know the case is done. Like, think about, like you said, think about yourself. But what she's arguing is like you're seasoned through it. Like your relationship with politics is through a certain anger and disposition toward black people. That's it. Sometimes it's just, that's all it is. Like with that woman who killed Latasha Harlins, it's very, very upsetting to say all the deal, but her back is turned. She's walking away. It takes an amazing amount, intense amount of hatred of black people to pull that trigger. And the Peter Liang situation.
And sorry, before you go to that situation, remember, as Kim points out, even if, which was not the case, but even if Latasha was stealing that juice, it was $1.79.
That's all it was.
Son.
Yeah.
Even if she had taken a juice, thrown it at the shopkeeper, stole another juice, cussed at everybody on her way out, she didn't deserve to be shot in the back of the head.
No.
So the escalation is also a part of the anti-blackness as well. Because nobody else would have been a cause to. But yeah, sorry. Go on to the.
No, but it speaks to the Peter Liang thing. Like Peter Liang, like I think I shared with you an article I wrote about Peter Liang, and I interviewed some Asian Americans. Asian American.
My bad. I didn't get to it. Sorry about that. Yeah.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I said no, but I think next time. But like this, I interviewed groups associated I interviewed mainly Asian American groups in New York City around issues of class and race and gender. And I also interviewed organizations that were taking part in favor of Gurley's family. So there were like, there's this one amazing group called CAV, Organizing Asian Communities. They have been on the front. So their mission has started with fighting anti-Asian violence in the early 80s, which did exist and does exist. And it was mainly all women who created. But then they expanded their focus to anti-blackness and to other forms. So when Akai Gurley was murdered by Peter Liang, and I'll get to also the craziness of like the sense of fear of black people that's so intense that you could pull that trigger. Because again, she goes into detail of like the police trigger takes a lot of effort to pull. It's not like a like you just shoot it. He really had to pull down on it. And even the people in the jury, I think they had to test the trigger, said they couldn't pull it, like just out of fear. You have to really pull down on it, which speaks to his fear in that area, because he was in like a certain projects where it's majority black, I'm assuming because of his fear. But it's like, it just tells you again, the fear and hatred of black people is so overwhelming that it's like, it's just jarring to some people, right? It's just like, you really took you that easy. Like you really had to pull on the trigger that bad. Like for me, when I'm driving down any block, I get so worried about hitting one person. If it's a, play, and then you see people zooming by, and you begin to ask these questions, like the seasoning process, like what lessons you learn, how do we get through it? But with that case, what stunned me too was the fact that he didn't even help him, Ikai Gurley. Like he just let that man die. And the question he asked after shooting that man, the bullet allegedly ricocheted, was, what can we do to make sure we're okay? Because then I think they called their police union captain. And I'm bringing this up because the article I wrote was a journal-ish article at Forge Organizing. Forge is really good. And I got to interview some people in CAV Organizing Asian Communities on other sides. And they said they took the side of Gurley because they understood this was like, this is also a different slippery slope, because some Asian Americans, Chinese, that she writes about, led like 100,000 size rallies for Peter Liang, saying that he's facing racism because other white cops get away with killing black people, essentially. But it's a slippery slope. It's like, okay, so what do you want? An equality of opportunity to kill black people? But that's the essence of what Kim is saying. It's like there's a version of Asian American uplift that is really more or aligned about, I want to have opportunity. Well, I don't want to be clipped for this, but people, Asian Americans want to have an opportunity just to not necessarily do that as the only function, but to be part of that class. And I think that's what she's so good at, is saying that and saying it exists in a liberal paradigm, right? It doesn't have to exist in a conservative extremist paradigm. It can exist in a liberal paradigm, even when some Asians mean well. But I did want to raise up CAV because they did an excellent job of supporting the Gurley family, and they were taking those risks. And there was a lot of divide in the Asian community at that time.
No, I yeah, appreciate all of that. So Detroit Showtime, I guess, thought it was worthy of sticking around. And this is actually something I wanted to bring up. So I'm glad that Detroit Showtime, I'm glad you did stick around. ADOS and FBA and other new Negro xenophobes have embraced Kim to justify general xenophobia toward all immigrants and use her scholarship as proof foundational Black Americans get treated worse. So thank you for the comment. And I do, all jokes aside, I am glad that you stuck around.
Yes.
So I did have this in my notes to bring up, because as I'm reading this, I said, I made a joke about it. And, you know, that one of the things one of the solutions Kim offers at the end of the book in particular is that Asians embrace African-American reparations.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought immediately of that very community that Detroit Showtime is talking about. And I'm not surprised that they would have picked up on her work. So first of all, no one, certainly among the broad, vague so-called Black left or any left, denies that Black people are treated worse. That's never been, you know, certainly my critique of reparations or ADOS, FBA, et cetera, and so forth, never has included that Black people are treated equally or better, or you know, Black people are definitely treated worse. Black people are deserved more than the world could ever offer up. If anything, this is where I had kind of, you know, so I made a little joke in my notes about this is, oh, they're going to love this. The reverse hashtag community is going to love this. I also was thinking of it in terms of where I felt there were a couple people, like, admittedly, when I saw Alicia Garza referenced at one point, quoted it, I was
Lewis
like, okay,
Gordon.
and Lewis Gordon,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, so Kim may not have plumbed the depths of Black radical tradition thought, maybe, but. And then when I saw her in her conclusion talking about reparations and some other things, I was kind of laughing, because I think I was honestly thinking of the criticism I get for my little book, and its lack of solutions. And I was like, well, it's not that it has no solution, it's just that you don't like the one I've offered. And then I'm saying the same thing here. And I felt like this is, and I felt this is the pull that I think happens in scholarship, academic work, or just book writing in general, where people feel compelled to offer up, or even, and sometimes even asked by their editors,
Right.
could you please say something about a solution, because we've just read 400 pages of how of how this is a mess, and we don't want to just leave the reader. And I could almost feel like, and I don't know Kim, and and maybe I'm just projecting, which is very real possibility here. I just was like, I feel her saying, all right, I got to say something. So I talked about Obadeli and the reparations movement effort he made. Let me, throw, stop being anti-Black, support reparations. And it's like, it's like, and then that's where I started to feel like, all right, it's like we've run out of gas. We got to close the book out. I've said all that. I've done all the real hard work.
Right.
What do you want me to do here? Like, I don't know what to, like, really, she should be saying, look, I don't know what to tell you. Look at all this that I've been just talking about for 400 pages. What do you want me to say? I made my contribution. You all figure it out. But we're not allowed to say that. You gotta have you gotta have no support. And I see hope on the horizon. And like Dr. Burroughs used to joke about, you had to, if you're Black in particular, you had to end with something like Obama is on the right path.
Right.
And but the reality is that this is one of the and I'll bring it back here. One of the conflicts that we have is that I think what the real solutions that are necessary are not going to be publishable and are not appropriate for YouTube and academic scholarship and et cetera and so forth. So I think in on some level, these spaces, academic publishing, et cetera and so forth, the purpose is to just provide some analysis, some information, some history, some sound logical research, and then you do have to just give it to people and let them hopefully make good use of it. That said, back to this point, the reverse hashtag community is a reflection of a very real problem that Black people, African people in this country continue to face a very particular, specific form of abuse. What we don't need are white nationalist based solutions or answers that emanate from the white nationalist republic that is creating these problems in the first place.
Right.
And that's my biggest problem with that community. They keep taking a very rational starting point and running off to the right for their answers. And what I'm saying is, we were starting with the same point. Black people have a very particular extra levels of abuse, but the answers are not going to be found in the republic as it's currently constituted. So why I would like to have this work, for me, add weight to my argument around, at least for overt public conversation, public policy that targets a massive redistribution of the wealth everyone has already created. At an initial starting point, that will alleviate some of these tensions and make it unnecessary for a Korean shop owner to be in a hostile conflict with a poor Black customer, because in part, the exchange that those two people represent would create wealth for both communities and make all these hostilities, at least at the level of materiality, moot. and then it just becomes, can there be can we test the Marxist argument that material conditions produce consciousness, in
Mm,
which case we might see communities come closer together.
mm,
I don't know if I'm not there yet.
mm.
I'm just trying to get to the point where the world we're already stuck in is producing conditions that are literally amenable and comforting for everyone. Um, yeah. So that said, because the other part of it, oh, that was the other part. That said, after 400 pages of reading about how anti-blackness is weaponized by whites using Asians, broadly speaking, I struggle to see where I struggled to see what would happen faster. Would
Mm.
it be, is it faster to expect, per Kim's closing argument, that this broad swath of Asians would be convinced to cast votes specifically and only for Black American reparations? Or is it more logical to think that radical elements within all of these communities could unite and build a movement that would make all of these conversations moot? And that's, I don't know, but that's the race I think that we have to run, or
Ki-
pun intended.
I want to say, like, to the commenter, that's a really, I'm glad he brought it up too, and I'm glad he stayed on, because that is a valuable. So one, it's not up to Dr. Kim to be the one to be like watching over how her work is used, right? Like a lot of works get misused, right? So I just want to say, like, it's not Dr. Kim's prerogative or fault to have done, because the FBA community, as far as I understand it, as a non-black person, is fairly conservative, and they're always looking for ways to just reinforce their opinion. I really would have uh, uh, a deep suspicion that maybe a lot of them didn't read the entire book, because this is a very in-depth book. The result of the analysis is not to argue just that Black people are treated worse. The result of it is like what Asian Americans, how we relate to it, and I think that's a far more nuanced argument than what the FBA community will take. Because you can have lots of, different sorts of works that get reappropriated. And so I just want to raise that. Like, just because the FBA community is misusing it, to be quite honest, does not invalidate the work that she's done. And again, for decades, right? She has been doing this kind of work, valuable work, theoretically, materially, for decades. I do want to say, though, there are parts of the argument or parts of the people she brings up that I would have critiques of. Like, for instance, you mentioned already Alicia Garza for some obvious examples, which is, to be quite honest, using the national BLM movement to be more of a democratic vessel, unfortunately, at the expense of working class Black folks and some other middle class Black folks who really, really were trying to do something and are trying to do something. Because I don't even know what Alicia Garza is doing right now. Not saying she has to do something, but it's very bizarre, just like gone in that sense after all this sort of money that was spent. But also, Lewis Gordon, as you've raised, is a Zionist, and he is, in my opinion, uh, really staining the reputation of Frantz Fanon. In terms of, and I do want, there's some critiques I have, like, not critiques, but like humble expansion ideas maybe for Dr. Kim, because I think so things that come up in her work remind me of other work sometimes that I don't always agree with. So one is, Fanon is more than just black skin, white masks. I do think among some Afro pessimists too, there is this insistence on Fanon, but it's very particular, because Fanon's life is solidarity. So I do think there is a little bit of that concentration that needs to happen, because Rest of the Earth is him in solidarity with Algerians who are not Black. So that's one thing I wanted to raise. And then, of course, you have certain sections that are a bit, I kind of understood what she was trying to say. But I also was a little bit like, wary of some, because I think on her discussion about Japanese Americans in concentration camps, she did raise at some points like how they still had certain, like, it wasn't as bad as Black folks in Jim Crow. I get that, but I still think that the experience of being in the concentration camp for 4 years was pretty traumatic. And it wasn't great. Like, I do think there was a little bit of like, they're still receiving some amenities. They were able to create certain communities. They did blackface minstrel shows, which is insane, but they still were in a concentration camp. And I can see how an FBA again, this is not for Dr. Kim to disavow, but I can see how an FBA person could go in there searching for things like we're searching for things, although we're doing it intellectually, and being like, see, even in that situation, they chose anti-blackness. But there are certain things I would have wanted maybe to sort of also expand. Like, she brings up several characters. So she brings up the Japanese American Citizens League for how they try to reinvent Japanese Americanism after World War II, in part with anti-blackness. I get that. But they were Japanese Americans, because I'm not Japanese, so I want to also be able to say this. Yuri Kochiyama, like, she is a Japanese American woman. Her husband was part of the reparations movement. And she herself was a Puerto Rican nationalist and was considered, I think, to be part of the new African nation. Like, she was that much in vogue and in part in these communities.
And Kim goes through the Richard Aoki case too.
She does, but that's where I would also
fascinating,
which is fast. But I also think that conversation could have been flipped with, there were certain places where I wanted to see more of certain other people too. Just to not to juxtapose, because they were because for every Richard Aoki, there was a Grace Lee Boggs who was very, very, part of that same era of I mean, she's older than Richard Aoki, I assume, because she was born in like the early 1900s when I was like, holy shit. So she lived I think she died at 100 or something, like a crazy high number.
Wow, that's right. She's not mentioned at all in this book.
I think she may have been mentioned slightly.
I just did a word search to confirm,
she's not?
And I didn't see it. I'll do it again just to double check. But I did. But
and I'm saying this in a
no,
very
Boggs, Grace Lee and Boggs are not in there.
So to me, there was a little bit of that I felt like a little bit of that could have been still mentioned and still hold up your theory. But I do think it is important for Asian, like, I'm not trying to defend Asian American, I'm Asian American, but I'm not like East Asian, but Grace Lee Boggs was pretty significant. And Grace Lee Boggs's like theoretical approach wasn't always about anti-blackness, that's true, but certainly her work with her husband were very important in theorizing like just nationalist movements, theorizing about autonomy. And of course, she moved to Detroit after her experience in Chicago, hearing about African Americans protesting around housing conditions. So it was part of her thinking of being part of the Black nexus of politics. And even when she was asked to represent Asian Americanists, I think later on in life, she was quite uncomfortable because she didn't view Asian Americanness as important as Blackness. Like, she said, you should all be in solidarity with Black people. So she would have been, I think, perfect for that. So that's where I felt a little bit like, in a particular way, like, why not raise her point? And then finally, I do think there does need to be at some point an inclusion or an expansion into South Asians, just because Indian Americans are now the leading this is again not up to her because she just publishes in 2023. These things just happen. But Indian Americans and South Asians, they were mentioned in one part of someone's quote near the end. So they were mentioned. So if they were included, we do need to be part of the discussion, because I do think that's important, because in Asian American lore, anti-Asian American lore, South Asians are grouped in. Technically, they are part of that procedure. They were not separated. They were separated as Hindu with the two O's, like, kind of ridiculous. But the whole Asiatic exclusion barrier did include Asia. This is where I'm against the disaggregation thing, because I'm like, I get how we're different with language, but there was a systemic structural thing that was seeing us as part of a horde. That's the truth of it.
Got you.
And then,
right.
Yeah. And then the final thing is, with Afro-pessimism, because I do have issues with Frank Wilderson, guys. I've read his book, his trade paperback. And this is not about Dr. Kim, but there are instances, yes, African Americans overall have faced worse, but there's also, I think there needs to be some discussion about Native people in these discussions, because that to me is quite glaring at times.
Yeah, I was saving that, and I saw first of all, thanks for the super chat. POC and white leftists can be anti-black. Yes, that's very true.
That's part of the book.
But I saw this Culture 88. It will change. Will it change First Nations of America context or beef? This book, I'm assuming, was part of the question. And I thought I was wondering, again, Kim can't do everything with this book.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I, to your point, what I would have liked, and again, it could have been satisfied with even just a paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are figures like Yuri Kochiyama, Grace Lee Boggs, this, Richard Aoki, whoever else, and although that's a very interesting, I don't know what I think about that, to be perfectly honest, but my point is that she could have said there are people like this who made mighty contributions to left wing struggle, blah 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 blah, but they are also not reflective of the whole. They are
Right.
wild anomalies. So I'm going to shout them out, but I want to stick to what is the traditional, or the non anomalous experience and relationship between these groups and communities, and that I would think makes sense, and would have for me satisfied. I don't know for you, but that would have done a lot to satisfy.
I think something like that would have been helpful. And but the thing that I'm also trying to say is like with Palestine, for example, and also with the Asian Americans, because she brings up the third world solidarity unity that happened, and she does say that did exist, and there was a lot of Asian Americans in solidarity, and it was a different thinking too. I think it's a thinking that I miss. Like, it's a thinking that some Asians really did believe of them just immediately part of the third world, right? Like, that's the thing that I think, because this is so weird because I'm so beneath, like, she's very amazing, but like, what I'm trying to say is that if there was something, like, I feel like the book could also have suggested there's something to recover from a certain tradition, because there is an implication that this is wholly new. That's where I would slightly disagree, and I think it would be nice to recover a third world unity that's missing. You can argue that Asian Americans don't have that now, which I do think that's true, which is also a result of suppression of Cold War groups and communist groups, right? Because that's what's missing, right? But in that era, I do think there was because the other thing that was happening with Asian Americans, they changed their terminology for themselves from Oriental, which is highly offensive to Asian, because they also were trying to be part of the Vietnamese identity, which was seen as what Palestine is seen as now. And again, with the Black Panther Party, which she mentions, they did view the Asian identity as like the nexus in that sense. So I think there needs to be something said about that. You can still have your discussion about anti-blackness in the folding eras, which is true, but I think that was not an anomaly. I think that was in a really important decade that could have been said to be like, oh, maybe there's things to recover from that decade about how, because I do think the Asian Americans who are part of the third world unity, I do not think they would balk at paying reparations or being part of the reparations movement. I really don't think that. I think they would actually think about, okay, well, let's extend it, which is fine. Because also, if you think about Palestine now, which is technically West Asia, I'm not trying to, but it is like Viet Thanh Nguyen, he wrote an article in The Nation about Palestine as Asia. So it's now a coming up discourse. It's a relevant discourse. That is also another thing to factor in, because anti-blackness does not explain that entirely either. So there are these important hot zones I think could still explain something, but I would like maybe for more discussion about that. Like, it's a little bit more complicated than anomaly. I do think that era really had a different scope of thinking that offered some insight that we could recover, right? And the point being, like, there's a famous book, not famous, but there's a book called Activism, Black, Yellow, Brown. It's by Laura Polito, who she does mention. She talks about that, and she talks about how for some Asian American groups, they were quite fascinated by and very emboldened to make these efforts to join with the Black Panther Party. Again, these are still small groups, but I mean, if you're talking about the Black Panther Party, they were still, like, at least culturally large, if that makes sense. There was one part of the book that was quite fascinating, because she says Black Panther Party did not theorize anti-blackness, I think, at one point, which I found kind of fascinating, and I was struggling with that. But I would have liked to see more of that decade. I think that's the only thing again, she can't do everything, because that would be 500, 600 pages. But I think that decade was quite enlivening. It had a lot of stuff in it that was very, very epic. And I think for the Asian American radical movement, there was a lot of suppression of it just with the other groups. And she does mention and hint at it because she discusses COINTELPRO. But I think that's the only little, like, thing that I had a slight issue with. And of course, Grace Lee Boggs. And you were like, I did think if you're going to mention, because Richard Aoki is also a tale of, I think for some men, Asian American men, there is a desperation for a certain kind of hyper masculinity that Richard Aoki presented. Like he's the cool beret waving Asian guy with the gun. He's the one who gave the guns first to Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. So there's a fascination to that. But I think also that is a thread that could have been interesting, that explains a bit. Like maybe the explanation is also gender in that regard. Like why was he uplifted when the fact is like he was also exposed as a Fed. But that doesn't disabuse me of the era because we had Grace Lee Boggs. So I'm just like, that's where I think it would have been interesting to see a woman.
So that was the thing. And Kim, to be fair, I thought did a pretty good job of bringing some complexity to the Aoki example, because as far as I'm aware, there is still an ongoing debate. Was he a snitch? Was he playing the FBI? Is the FBI telling the truth?
Right, that's true.
Is this author that revealed it telling the truth? There's been a lot of discussion, and for a time I was more aware of it, but then I am in an updated, the most updated version. But so sort of to your point, I didn't expect to get from Kim's book something aligned with my politics. So I admit again, as I said at the beginning, I was mining it and reading it with an eye specific to our project and more specifically to my own narrow, almost at times it does feel petty. Like I just want to fully expose just this one little bit of a myth. So I just was overly, but I did notice, for instance, to your point, she mentions Bang Dung. She mentions the counterintelligence program. She makes reference to the history of the Panthers and to that time of struggle. But this is not the frame she's using for her book.
Right.
So she's not looking to engage those histories or those politics. She's just acknowledging in certain moments. So she says, like, there was a Bang Dung conference, but she's not using that as a reference to discuss a history of radical forms of unity. When she mentions now I'm forgetting something else, but that's the point. Same thing with the counterintelligence program. She's not bringing up the counterintelligence program to describe a broader context of U.S. imperialism and militarism and Psy-war and counterinsurgency, and like that's not what she's
right. I guess what I'm saying is to the audience, to the reader, that there's other things you could also I just want to, because that reminds me of one quote. The other thing I want the audience then to realize about this book is that it is definitely doing what we hoped it would do, which is like, again, economically speaking, there's no way you can just say African Americans do what Asians do just because of the political
situation. Would have to say Black Americans could not ever and cannot do what Asians have done. And then we should look more critically at what Asians have been able to do.
Exactly, which is all part of the real material analysis of like, it's not culture, it's policy. But for readers, the only thing that I want people to know is that because the thing that was very fascinating was like she also drops these hints about the bigger things that are happening. To your point, I'm trying to say that. So like she talks about Japanese Americans and she relates it to the JACL, or previously there was another group that was before the internment that was very like tied to Japan. So she ties what's going on between Japan as a state with the U.S. affecting Japanese Americans, right? And how they view Black people. But then she refers back to Japan in the post-World War II era and more recently with the 70s and 80s and 90s. And China too, because she talks about the anti-Black riots that had taken place fairly recently. And she also talks about, which I did not know, and she also talks about that ad. I don't know if you saw that ad, but there was a very famous ad about that African guy being in the laundry and coming out Asian. I actually saw that.
I didn't see the ad, but
I saw that ad.
Oh my God. But I'm reading her chapter, and at one point I think she even uses the word mark. This is my point. It's not to deny that Asians or anyone else has these anti-Black sentiments, but it's to see, look at how they originate. She talks about how enslaved Africans were brought back to China in the 19th century, after the so-called opium wars as a demonstration,
Right.
like you know, seeding, planting more anti-blackness among the Chinese, who ended up doing, as you said, blackface, and
Right. Right. Right.
like they get in, and then all the way up to today, where she's showing how on their, I forgot what it's called, but their social media platform after
Yeah.
George Floyd, they're basically saying as much racist nonsense as you would see
Right.
today on Twitter from the whites.
Right.
But what I'm seeing is, again, not to justify it, but in trying to understand how people are moved into certain conclusions, to a certain conclusions, this is marketed. She's
That's what
showing how
she's.
this is
Yeah.
Western marketing. So going back to the reverse hashtag thing, I just don't understand. Not that I don't understand. It tactically doesn't make sense to go back to try to align with the ones producing that imagery, and denying uh and denying all of that, and then while cutting off all those who may be more inclined towards solidarity, or who you could at least understand are being pushed in certain directions. So again,
Right.
it's not about let's forgive everything and forget everything and be friends with everybody. I'm again speaking tactically. I'm that will just not ever make sense to me, to say let's go to the victim of the propaganda, and blame them, and go work with the
Yeah.
source of the propaganda. Like
Right. Right. Right.
so that part anyway. Yeah,
No, but so she does say marketing. So she does say that, and she brings
yeah.
up neoliberalism, but the only thing I want to tell the reader is that there are sections that I think the reader does need to expand on for themselves. Like, for example, when she brings up China, so on page 250, she says, if Asian Americans stood in an ambiguous relation to the US state, Asian communist nations, China, Vietnam, and North Korea did not. So there are these hints towards communist nations. Again, not saying they were perfect, but communist nations having maybe a particular style of relationship to Africa and to African Americans that I think a lot of us have read. I would just want, because she does it with Japan, like she makes the connection between Japan and Japanese Americans a few times, and Japan with Asian Americans a few times. I just think if she wanted just to add maybe a paragraph, like you said, or two about then the middle period, because she is kind of suggesting, like you said, it's not magical thinking. Like, it's not just inherently Asian people hate black people. It's that in the neoliberalism, well, China's still socialist, but certainly it opened up its markets. In the new kind of Asian socialism or Chinese socialism, there have been these drip, drip, drip of Western influence, right? Which then explains marketing. And then what's interesting, she also mentions the people who, not exactly Tiananmen Square, but she did say the pro-democracy demonstrators were actually one of their first demands was about the Chinese state paying too much in tuition for Africans to come and study. I found that very fascinating and very much in line with anti-communist thinking. Like, if you dig deep enough with every single country of the Eastern Bloc nations that were communist, many of them were complaining about the communist governments doing too much for others, which was a
Mm.
thing that kept happening. I mean, Gaddafi, he was not necessarily a socialist, but when Gaddafi was in Libya, when he was controlling Libya, he offered a lot to black Africans too. And that was one of the number one issues a lot of non-black Arabs had. And that's why they restarted the slave markets the day after he was brutally murdered. So, but from that point of view, I would have wanted maybe just a little bit about the different eras, because because if you're
Mm.
doing it for Japan, because she mentioned she's doing that sort of, the country's doing this and then therefore the people here. I just would have wanted some of that too, because that is a big chunk of Asian politics. Like, Mao was inviting the Black Panthers, North Korea invited the Sandinistas. I know they're Latino. Even in the Indian context, there was I think Nehru threatened the UK about their treatment of Kenyans and said, we're going to start sending guns to the Mau Mau if you don't stop. I'm not saying it's perfect, because I'm sure behind closed doors, maybe Nehru still was like the guy from Get Out, like the guy who's like, I would have voted Obama 3 times. Like, maybe that is the mentality he had. You know what I mean? But he still was threatening to give guns, even so.
Yeah.
I feel like that was sometimes a little bit lacking, and I fear a little bit of someone who'd read this being like, oh, it's just Asians just hop over these 4 decades of communism. And then the last thing, there was a section where she included Get Out. Jordan Peele's movie,
Yeah.
and where he was asking the, because I've been asked this too by people of color, like, what do you think, about the, and I sometimes am like, I do like I like Get Out. I think Get Out as a movie is actually quite good, and interesting to me, and it's a culturally impactful film. But that scene did get me because it is not that informative to me, because it's maybe a Japanese guy, which is not really reflective of a lot of Asians. And then at the same time, if I'm being blunt, yes, it's an Asian guy who's anti-black and who wants to do the same thing as white people, but I don't think it's a great analysis that actually she does in the rest of her book of what people should do. But it just reminded me of the mediascape too, if that makes sense. It reminds me of what people are fed in terms of how to relate to each other. Because that was a source of discussion, both bad and good. There were some Asian American writers who were like, this again is a good distillation of how we are and how we should change our anti-blackness. And then others saying like, you shouldn't trust Asians because of this. But I'm like, dog, it's one character in the movie. Like there's just a lot of other things going. And I have an issue with Jordan Peele and Asians because he even in the other movie he did, which was about the flying monster,
Nope.
which I kind of like. Yeah, nope. Again, the one Asian guy who's there, or one discernible Asian, East Asian, the
Mm-hmm.
Korean guy,
Mm-hmm.
he is, an owner of a big ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, you're giving room for almost every other group actually to be kind of identifying with the struggle of what's going on. Like, what is going on? And then I think he also,
Interesting.
yeah, so there's a little bit of that. That was a very minor thing, but I was like, oh my God, please don't bring up Get Out. I really, that one scene haunts me because when it comes up, I don't know what to think of it because I'm just like, is it supposed to represent everyone? But anyway, I don't know.
I
So these
would,
are, yeah,
you know, I didn't think much of this. I did see that she said this. I didn't
yeah,
think much of it
yeah,
because I think I largely just agreed. I
yeah,
assume that.
same.
So it's interesting you said that because I assume that Peel selected. I mean, I'm saying assume, but I really feel like I know this to be true. Like, I don't believe any of these decisions are haphazard. So
Right.
I'm sure that Peel is trying to say something, or I would agree. I'm inclined to agree with Kim that he's trying to say something. Although I hear what you're saying, that it's not. She doesn't do a lot. She's just kind of throwing that in there.
Well, I'm saying the rest of the book is much more nuanced than that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm just saying there's decades in between of the communist era that again, this is impossible to say what someone should do because they've done so much, but it's like there is I think people will miss the fact that for 30, 40 years there was a different discussion of how Asians should relate to Africans through the communist lens. Because China, Vietnam, if you want to consider non-black people, Algeria after the FLN won, they
Mm-hmm.
invited members of the Black Panther Party. So there's a little bit of that I think could struggle with some, because the story could still be the same. We live in a different era of market capitalism where that horizon has not been obliterated, but has been severely depressed, right? Like Cuba itself is slowly being killed, and Cuba's done a lot for like every group imaginable. So there's a little bit of that I was like waiting for because she did that with Japan and Japanese. So I was like, okay, I was actually more curious about what Mao said because I know a little bit, but I would have been more curious about what he said, what Kim Il Sung said, things like that.
So I don't mean to move from that point, but that
Mm,
was another part of the reverse hashtag piece that I wanted to bring up that you just reminded me of, that one of the things that a quick read or a depoliticized read or a conservative read of the book might allow people to miss is so much of what Kim is saying had to do with the way Japanese and Chinese and Koreans were treated in this country. So much of their treatment in this country has to do with their connection and their relationship to a particular nation back
mm-hmm,
home, and that nation's relationship to a geopolitical global environment. My point being that this is in part why Black American radical wing of Black American struggle has always been internationalist and always involved, particularly in Africa diaspora and then beyond,
right.
for that particular point. Without a nation to which we can point to and say that that's our home nation, we are cut off and weakened by that fact. And this and with and uh, uh, um, and why appropriately radical movements have said we cannot just be wedded and anchored to those who have created the problem. We have to have an outside game, as the late great Dr. Turner, James Turner, used to say in our classes. We can't just rely strictly on an inside game. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That so much of what Kim is showing is
Right.
the Japanese were treated here, had a lot to do with what Japan was doing, China, so on and so on and so forth. For good or for bad, for right interpretation or not, it had all of that had a lot to do,
Right.
and still does have a lot to do with how these communities are treated, and including why Black people have a particular treatment that other communities don't. So yeah, but I didn't want to. But so that's why I was saying, to your previous point, when I didn't expect that Kim was going to be approaching this from a sort of from an anti-imperialist left lens,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
from the perspective of movements. And I'm not saying that to give her the pass or to say your critique is misplaced. It's just to say, really just to say, I was only looking for what I found.
Right.
So I know we're about at 2 hours. The only thing that I would want to do, and maybe we could even come back to this in another conversation, because I don't think we have to put this book down forever, is I would want to come back maybe with renewed energy and focus to some of the points she's making, I think towards the end, about that marketing of anti-Blackness around the world.
Right.
Because I think that has a lot to do with a lot of domestic to the United States shortcomings and analyses, and has a lot to do with even why some of the shapings of Black and even other politics are so narrowly formed, or too narrowly formed. But
well, she says,
but if there's something else you want to get to, or want to make sure we cover today, let me know.
I just want to reinforce what you said.
Sure.
On page 309, she does say, like, as in Japan, and she's talking about the modern era, like 70s, 80s, 90s now. As in Japan, commodity capitalism is an important driver of Black degradation in China. Put simply, anti-Blackness sells.
Yep.
And she talks about that. So again, she is bringing up these material concerns. I think for me, it was just more like speaking to the audience and making sure that, because the thing I always get worried about is a creeping sense of nihilism that can happen, where it's, again, not up to her, but people could read and say, well, then how can we trust so and so, which I've faced as an organizer, and sometimes it is a lot of work to undo. So like in my dissertation, for example, one of the conclusions I find is that a lot of African Americans, it may not be surprising to you or others, but African Americans have a lot of skepticism about building unity with other groups, because of not just any like racism necessarily. It's just about like they've been screwed over before, or they don't quite think that the other side will understand everything about their issue, right? Which is true. But what I also found in my dissertation is that in the end, though, a lot of them there were still these common core issues that was coming up, like housing and other things. So you can still have, I wrote this down, you can still have intensity of difference. Like, for example, African Americans in terms of housing will be worse off, just generally worse off. You can find a middle-class person here and there. You can find a Ta-Nehisi Coates who is very much an anomaly and have a multi-million house, which he still have to give up because of racism. But nonetheless, those are anomalies. But the private market exists to condemn everyone to a life of having to pay high rents or mortgages. And it also does affect, from my interviews, lots of other groups of color. So there's like this sort of thinking that I keep coming back to, which is there shouldn't be a nihilism. There are certain tactics and strategies to get to a unity, but that unity has to be struggled through. And that's where this book does, for me, I view it as, like you said, tactile effort too as well. So I was looking at the economic section, but I always read these books with an eye of like, what does this mean for me in terms of explaining myself as a non-Black person, as to a Black person or other person, why we should work together. I hope that don't come up pretending, but it's like something that comes up in my mind. Like, and that's why I'm always like trying to have these reference points. Like, okay, well, just remember, like, there are these things that happen, not to say they don't happen anymore, that they're still happening, but it's not the thing that you're thinking about in terms of Asians being a certain way or Latinos or vice versa is of this moment, and is shaped by But the irony, I've also gotten a lot of inclusion from African Americans based on the fact that I'm not East Asian. So that's the other flip of it. Like I've actually gotten a lot of times where
You're from the
African
good
American,
side.
yeah, well, if they just assume I'm Muslim, and then there's like,
Mm.
oh, I'm maybe Muslim, or my dad was Muslim, or my grandfather was Muslim, or I like Muslims, other Black Muslims, and I get asked questions, and I'm not Muslim, so I'm just like, yeah, I don't know, like, I think that's pretty cool, but that's been my experience too, which I think again, at some point, someone needs to incorporate into that analysis as well, because South Asians and the experiences of some Arabs does indicate a kind of throwback to a different era, as well as something that needs to be theorized as well. Because to me, it's part of the Asian American story, to be quite honest. Like it's like 9/11. We're seeing that story play out again and again, and it's affecting people who are not Muslim and Muslim, and many of them would regard themselves as Asian too. That's the
Mm.
thing. Like, if they're regarding themselves as Asian, there needs to be a theory of them as well that incorporates that. So that's the thing that I'm trying to work on. So that's why I'm always like reading these books in that end, because it's part of my dissertation of POC alignment. And also sometimes I'm just grumpy and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like this could work or that could work. And I've had every side chew me up or say like it's not going to work. I find those conversations fascinating. I never get upset as much as I used to when I was younger, but sometimes I'm like, well, there's this reference point that is kind of missing here or there or that, you know, and sometimes people take it or they don't. But for me, I'm also thinking about the material, like organizing factor, because I think with her, the Asian American stuff with reparations, that's a that's a material demand that I think all Asians should support, hands down. But then how to get there does require a bit of finesse. Like, I don't know if I'm going to go to an Asian person and say, you just need to do this. And they'd be like, no. So there's that
I
questioning
just
of
don't
like,
believe it. I just that's where I'm most pessimistic, maybe more than
mm,
anything. That I just don't believe people are going to be moved to cast a specific vote for a transfer of trillions of dollars to Black people only.
right.
But at the same time, and it's in part why I was saying what I was saying about the reverse hashtag and other communities. I am, again, I acknowledge it, and some have raised an eyebrow about my use of the term, but I do, I it mean it, that for me, that this is part of a racialized trauma.
Mm,
And part of my reaction in response to that is to be pessimistic around the possibilities for non-Black communities of any variety to have real solidarity with Black communities. But my thing is that the answer to my concern and to all of these questions is best or most likely found in what is that broad Black radical tradition.
mm-hmm,
So I recognize that this might be just a shortcoming of mine. This is why I've always identified with Black nationalism. I think that to the extent that all these other groups and communities are encouraged towards various nationalisms, Black people here should have a healthy variety of their own. But that radical strand of it that does incorporate an internationalist perspective with an eye on ending imperialism. But the so that's my only thing. Um uh where I overcome, I hope, those pessimistic tendencies is finding solutions in those traditions and examples in those traditions where that we brought up here today can be found. Where
right.
I am confident I will not find a solution is in the white nationalism
Right.
of the United
Right.
States and its allies.
Right. Right.
That's the only direction I'm not looking in for a solution. Pretty much everything else is more or less on the
Well, isn't
table.
isn't their thing also the FBA movement? Isn't there also a big mistake or their intentional one is to like also disregard the influence and camaraderie of like Black folks from the Caribbean? Like, isn't that their also thing? Like,
Yeah,
it's really about reparations just for the
just for those who
domestic.
can
Yeah.
have a certain. So but then, those who can claim, and then sometimes I've seen different arguments, and I don't pretend to be up on the
Hmm.
latest, but those who can claim direct ancestry to those enslaved in this country. Now, I happen to work with two colleagues where I think these are my funniest responses to this. I happen to work with two colleagues off the top of my head that I know of, both of whom would be identified as not qualifying as FBA because their immediate ancestry is Liberia and the other is somewhere in the Caribbean. I can't remember which.
Okay.
Ooh, that's bad. I should know. But my point being, in each case, each of them have in their lineage people who were enslaved in Africa, brought here,
right,
or snatched from Africa, brought here, enslaved in the United States, and then who migrated or emigrated. I always make, I'm not never sure which is which. They left this country of their relative free will, settled elsewhere, and now then had children who then came back here. In other words, both of these colleagues of mine technically qualify as FBA. They have an enslaved ancestry here in the United States that they can point to and identify with records, et cetera, and so forth. But themselves were not born in this country.
Right.
And then would be, in some cases disqualified from the but my real point is really just that in each case, the dominant hashtag communities that we're talking about here are themselves disingenuous right-wing political efforts, neither of which are really meant to get even what I think they're claiming are their goals.
Right.
I think these are, at best. Anyway, I just have a very low opinion. So my point is that just again, tactically though,
yes,
I have my issues with reparations in general for those same reasons. I just, I think tactically it would be better, at least a step better, would be to just simply say, look, I know everybody hates Black people. That is honestly, I'm confident. Like everybody is, at least everybody is encouraged to hate Black people. So I'm not interested in I'm interested in material and lived experience. So why don't we all go for this 54 trillion that the 1/10 of 1% are worth in this country? Let's go for the 23 trillion in GDP that this country produces every year, that we produce in every year, and give everybody a version of reparations. And then if we want, we can tier it. Black people can still get the most, but even down to, at the bottom of this tiering, even down to the white worker. The white working class has been getting ripped off for a couple hundred years too. So we could say, let's then we go to, we get the, and then we could just tier it.
Right.
Everybody's going to end up, and the point would be that we would be pointing towards a society that is actually livable, and not one where all these antagonisms remain, ownership and power remains, and a few people get a check that they then have to redistribute back into this exact same dysfunctional madness.
No. But what you're saying too is about taking away, because what I tell my students, like, there is it a Kwame Ture quote, but he said something about, a white guy can call me this or hate me for what he thinks of me, but in this situation I would care because I know he can hurt me. But in a society where he can't hurt me, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, he associated it with the power to act out on that hate. If you're just over there hating on me, but you can't stop me from having health care and decent housing and food and safety and you're not mobilizing and weaponizing, you're not able to, at least, even I've seen her name come back, even the late Frances Cress Welsing, her argument was was creating a world where whites were she, where I remember she never got fully specific on this, but where they were just rendered powerless in their ability to enact their hatred of everybody else. And that's fine. I'm not.
No, but that's the tier system, but also even before the poor white, there are, because the other thing that's kind of like important, like, okay, so with the FBI persona or thinking about like Caribbeans not be, because again, it's like it's a misinterpretation too of U.S. power anyway, right? Because U.S. banking was in the Caribbean for a while, exploiting those people even recently. So there's that. So when you're saying tiers, in my mind, it's also just accurate. It's not like, because there's also people in Central America who are, they have, like, a misinterpretation of U.S. power. Because U.S. banking was in the Caribbean for a while, exploiting those people even recently. So there's that. So when you're saying tiers, in my mind, it's also just accurate. It's not like, because there's also people in Central America who are, they the indigenous populations due to Elliot Abrams, like him supporting the death squads there, who I think went to a U.S. court to ask for money back because there was a sort of I hate to say mini, but there was a small genocide that occurred in one of the in one of the Central American countries, Guatemala. So there's also like a reality of like the analysis fits that. The U.S. power obviously shits the most on African Americans, particularly, and Native people, but it has found a way to expand itself through other groups of people, such as Black folks on the island. That's where I was always like confused by, because it's like, well, they were enslaved at one point anyway, of course, by the British, but who cares? Because America took over for the British, right? Like America basically gave like a handshake to them and said, "We'll do all the coups now, don't worry." But quite frankly, the analysis would have to take into account that they have also been exploited by a system that we put. I mean, the United States is like, it's been on the show, right? In the morning show, I think Erica said this and Jackie, where they were talking about America's now exploiting them by forcing Jamaica to get rid of their Cuban doctors. Like that leads to people dying and getting hurt. There has to be, all this is basically contained with a broader analysis anyway that's quite accurate versus the domestic analysis, which again goes into this idea of cutting off the foreign and domestic in ways that don't make sense, right? Like it doesn't make sense. Like if you look at also how soldiers viewed Filipinos, like back in 1898, they killed the shit out of them and they viewed them as like, well, we're Confederate troops. Now we get to do what we wanted to do, at the tail end of Reconstruction. So all this is connected too. Like to me, the tiered system is an accurate reflection of a lot of people's like impact with U.S. white supremacy and imperialism. Anyway, so because with Palestine, it's the same thing. Like one day, there's going to be lots of reparations there too, to be honest, and land that needs to be requisitioned, right? I know some people get upset with land back, but I'm sorry, if a majority of Gazans are refugees from Israel proper, what do you want them to do? Just stay in Gaza and be like, oh, now we're not getting bombed. You still don't got a house. The guy who has a house has the keys. Get the keys. So it's like, I don't know. Like there's a lot of that discussion that also I think it's just it gets intentionally cut off because we live in an America that's extremely neoliberal and everyone's kind of like hustling to get theirs, which I'm sympathetic to. I'm sympathetic to the average person who's like, I'm African American. I hate being called a person of color because what I'm faced, because it's true. Like one example she had is the statistics on carceral state. Like it's true. Like when I would hear people say POC, I would say like, I don't know. Like I think Latino and African American, some other groups here and there get affected more. So I get that. But then there has to be like, well, that's true, but that can still exist within a broader fight. Like it shouldn't be pitted against each other, if that makes sense. Because
no,
Claudia,
I mean it does, and
yeah.
and that's sort of what and again, I feel the same way. Even when there are discussions of biraciality or whatever, and people, Raylena Joseph put me onto this years ago. I credit her with this, but and as it turns out, my old childhood homeboy wrote about this in grad school before her. Actually, I just didn't realize it. But the point being that there needs to be specificity around
right.
this. That I'm not, my mixed experience is not the same as white and Japanese or whatever. Like there's a specificity connected to my father's blackness, and what's left of my own that is key here. And this is again where I like what I do like about Kim's work,
right,
in anchoring it in an anti-blackness. I might like to see a little bit more of a radical critique and edge added to that, or and weight given to that.
But that's for someone else to expand on, right?
And I agree. What I really do appreciate again is all of those are the, to your point, maybe less the Get Out part and more the policy stuff.
Yeah.
That, because that's where I think for me the work really is hitting the home runs. It's just so clear, and in some ways it's demystifying.
Yes.
That again, if and I know like people who would study urban planning would appreciate this more than I would, but if you sit and think about what is a city or a community going to look like if you survey the land and look at it from that 30,000 foot view and look at where are people, you could see how they're sitting there saying, we're going to let X amount here, X over here. We're going to use this to pit one group against another over here. And then we are at the end of the day going to walk off to the point where in 2026, 1/10 of us have $54 trillion and almost nobody's raising any goddamn questions about that.
Right.
It's like, and they'll be fighting each other for quote unquote reparations. And I'm increasingly frustrated with that. So and I admit it's maybe,
Or,
narrowing my view of some of this work, but yeah,
it's also with war with Iran, like it has the lowest percentage of any modern war in terms of support. And I'm thinking with those polling, it's actually bumped up because how people respond. There's usually people who want to talk. Like my parents get the call, they hang up about surveys. So that's higher. But then the Epstein class, I know I've brought this up a couple of times, but it explodes my mind. Maybe it shouldn't, given the recent allegations too coming out with Cesar Chavez and all the, how the societies. I read that article. It got worse and worse and worse. And I was like, I should stop reading this, but it was worse and worse. But it's true. Like, I think Jackie and Kim had the conversation just before this one about how this Western society doesn't give a shit about women and kids anyway. But then why? It is something to think about. Like, we had the reason why I brought up the 60s is
just quickly, do folks even realize white men had to argue in front of white people in white courts just to get people to put seatbelts on white kids?
Yeah.
Like to that point, they really do not care. God damn. But I'm like, even you don't even want to put seatbelts on your own children.
Right. Well, it is connected to anti-blackness in that sense. It's the fear of, it's like Charisse Burden-Stelly's work, the fear of blackness connected to fear of communism. That's what they really fear. Because like when white folks were talking about the fear of communism, it was really about their fear of black men dating their daughters. That was really came up a lot of times in those arguments. But I do think it is very. This book is useful to me still to think about. It just challenges. Oh wow, it just challenges. I think this book is meant to be read because it will challenge Asian Americans, progressive Asian Americans, and how they should relate, not just to analogizing ourselves, but really talking about the specificity of African American trauma and how then our identities are not just wielded as a weapon, but are a key contributor now to ending certain programs that are quite important. Like the affirmative action section really was, I mean, the Yik Woo thing nonetheless was that boggled my brain. But the later on parts where it was like, I knew about Ed Blum, I knew that he was recruiting certain people, but I actually did not realize how he wanted to have Asian people, like strategically. He said, we're done with whites. We need Asians in this. So we are in a war. And we're being used intentionally so for that war. But also the book is useful because it challenges Asian Americans about Asian American conservatism, who are willing participants in that war. They're not manipulated. They also hate black people and they think that they're special. So that's the thing I do want to say. This book is useful for challenging me as an organizer. But the thing about but then it also makes me think about, like, then how do we get to a point because the Epstein class thing is really on my mind because it's insane. These documents have been dropped and I've listened to so many podcasts about what's on the surface of them. We have an elite class that is capitalist and colonialist and are crazy. And it is insane how there hasn't been riots yet. So I'm just, thinking about that. And yeah, that's the it came out yesterday in a New York Times, I believe. And I think some community, they were about to rename some streets and they stopped, or they were about to do
there was going to be some renaming and some tributing of streets to Cesar Chavez, and then Huerta and some others now have come out alleging tremendous amounts of abuse over a long period of time that resulted in children. That I mean, it's just such a disturbing. It's just a disturbing story, and it's very sad. It's I honestly don't know what to say other than it's just it's yeah, sad and disgusting. And I wish we could say it was something that we didn't have to worry about happening anymore.
Yep, that's what yeah,
But
and
I
yeah.
feel like we haven't made
Mm-mm.
much of an advance since then. And I've even seen, this is even somewhat uncomfortable. I wasn't sure I was going to raise it, but I'll bring it up. I've even seen some criticism that was saying that was wanting to be critical of Huerta for waiting this long,
Mm.
despite having risen to certain levels of power within that movement, at and where she could have theoretically taken action as a leader of the movement instead of presiding over, not that she was even aware or allowing it, but ultimately not addressing it and allowing many more women to suffer similar fates. And when I first saw it, I said, I was like, then that's a lot. But at the same time, I thought this is at least something I think that at some point, maybe in more appropriate settings with more appropriate spokespeople, that's something that should be considered and discussed. But I don't know. It was just, but it's such a, but I don't know. I don't know. I
It's
don't know.
just like, but when you read that article too, it's about all his security guards. Like they did interview a few of them who are alive, and they were like, none of this happened, blah blah blah. But it's like it just brings to mind the allegedly the circles of complicity too, and how again
Exactly.
to the Epstein thing, it's the same. That's the through line for me too.
Right. Right.
That was like this man was able to use his stature. Like a lot of these girls viewed him as a hero,
Yeah.
took advantage of them repeatedly, and then of course he continued to do that with his other comrades like Hortha, who I think two of her kids with him she had to give away. I think to help keep that secret. That is insane. But it just reminded me of the Epstein thing because of the cones of complicity. Because when you look into that report, it is very similar on a wider scale because you have, I think, reporters involved in some sense. Like I think there's a very infamous picture of the Atlantic magazine editor or someone who's like the owner of the Atlantic laughing it up with Gazelle Maxwell, whose father is Robert Maxwell. But it
Right.
just boggles your mind. And again, you get a book like I'm trying to connect it, but the book on anti-Asian American, it just makes you think about the stuff that we have to deal with to get to the unified position to then tackle this big looming problem of colonialism and capitalism, American led, that is ruining the world too. So there's a little bit of that part of me that's also like, I think we should support reparations, but I also do think to get some people on our side, we do need maybe some tactics like the tiered system, and because there needs to be a reckoning with what's going on. Otherwise, the world is over. Like what Iran is doing is basically fighting against the Epstein state as best as it can, while the Epstein state, I mean, the president and other people are in that report, and they just keep lying to our face that they're not in the report. And then you have, I don't read it, but the podcasts I've listened to, TrueAnon and such, they've read it. It's even more insane than what you could imagine. Like they all go to the same schools, the private school world. They get to create certain charities for certain vulnerable populations. It's like the season 1 of True Detective, and you're just like, even that show now doesn't quite compare to this. Like my girlfriend and I finally watched that season together. I watched it before when I was younger, and she gets scared very easily, like I do. So I was like, "Are you sure you want to watch this?" Because in this climate, I just gave her a strong
Oh
hint.
no, the
Yeah,
reality's worse.
the reality is worse, but but it also carries a certain level of disturbance because you're like,
Hmm.
this is real plus worse. So to get to the part of unified, I don't know, like there does need the book is useful in that sense. Like Asian American progressives, including myself and others, even though I'm a communist, people need to read this book just to challenge themselves about what they really need to frame their fight about and who because this is really about Asians too. This is not about FBA. That's why I was like trying to disagree a little bit. Like I understood what the gentleman said in the comments about like
Mm.
some worries about FBA, but honestly this book is for Asian Americans. This book is for us to also deal with how even when we create these analogies of we're on the same side, it's not enough.
No,
the
I
Yipu,
agree. I
yeah, the
agree.
Yipu thing is crazy.
And that's why when I get, you know, when to Jared Ball's question about what would happen faster, Asians voting for a rising tide lift all boats approach or a black reparations
Mhm.
claim, it's a shame he doesn't see the problem there. First of all, it's not that I don't see the problem. It's a shame that you're not paying enough attention to what I am saying is the problem and how what you're saying doesn't address the problem. So when you then come back to say, how then are they your allies in reference to Cesar Chavez? Why would that level of argumentation could then be waged against black people? Then why would we could hold up the case I just talked about the other day of James Bevel? And then so then what would you say to that? So then you would say that black people, black American FBA can't be our allies either, because James Bevel did the same damn thing. And you could argue, if we're going to get really crimey with it, you could argue that what Bevel did was worse. Because at least so far, I haven't seen Chavez accused of anyone underage, whereas that can't be the same for Bevel. So again, your level of argumentation, as is often the case with the reverse hashtag community, is just insufficient. And that's what I'd like to think in some small way I and we are playing a part in correcting here.
But these
yeah.
But these questions of allies too, I think it's fine because it's an important question for Asian Americans to really ask. How are you really being allies?
Sure.
But for me, there's never in my mind, I've got to a point. This never, again, like I said, there's never like a. I think for some people, it's either you're completely on the same side in terms of all issues, or you're completely on the opposite side, right? But to me, I view these as both just constructively connected. Like Claudia Jones, for me, who's mentioned in this book. Because she's the other thing about this book that's quite amazing is
she's
the
just
history.
a tether though. She's
right.
she's
from,
not she's not FBA, so I don't know what you're doing there.
Well,
She's useless to the cause.
I mean, I guess you could find better people than the woman who got detained several times, had a heart issue, and then unfortunately died at a relatively young age. But of course,
remember, Kwame Ture is just a tether. Malcolm X is just a tether too. Like so like.
Do they say that? Well, Malcolm.
Yeah. I'm not making look. I wish I could make this up. I don't have the imagination for this, and that's why I wouldn't also have the imagination for championing Tucker Carlson as my spokesperson either.
Oh, I've seen that clip.
But
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Again, my point, and I think this is where you and I have some agreement. Well, a lot, but in this case as well, that I am 100% on the point that black people have a unique, worse, whatever you want to call it, experience than most of the communities we're talking about, and have a specific need for repair.
Right.
My only issue is I keep coming back to, and some want to continue to ignore it, or my number one issue at least is this refusal to seek out that reparations in the most radical way possible, which is of course not to wed ourselves and anchor ourselves solely to the white nationalist project that created the problem and has no interest in solving the problem, and is found in a new world, as Fanon was pointing out, in creating something that doesn't currently exist.
Right.
And we have to be realistic about what that world is. And obviously we're not going to live in a world that is only Black American. So other people are here on this, in this country and on this earth. And there has to be a way of reconciling that. Now, Huey Newton, the very FBA co-founder of the Black Panther Party, I really do like, I happen to like his intercommunalism argument.
Right.
And an approach. But look, I know that's not for everybody. So, but yeah, just I think, because I think I do need to start to wrap this up for today. That Kim's book is great. Yeah. It does need, as most books, my own included, an appropriately radical read and framing to make it as useful as it can be. But to your point, I also acknowledge that its ultimate goal is to address itself to Asians, and saying Asians need to figure out this anti-Black thing and recognize some stuff. So, you know, but oh wow, and I was wrong, so I apologize. So they're equally just as bad.
Yes.
So my apologies. I didn't mean to suggest at all that one was better than the other. They're both equally bad, and therefore, according to Robert, we can't unify with Latinos or Black people or really anyone, because there's always going to be some segment that have led, those.
Could we talk about this
Anyway,
more
yeah.
another time too? Because I know it's like, but I just want to add, like, this book is excellent. People should read it, even if you're not Asian American, because for others, your mind will be blown by the connections made. Like the Yik Woo thing really blew my mind because that's crazy. It really actually changed my feeling about things a lot. I was like, okay, I need to be very circumspect about Asians being actual bullets in this war, in that sense, like really
And she
not
does
just being,
use the word weaponized.
yeah, weaponized. Yeah. So it's like, it's not just a daft bystander who's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. It was like, oh, we can't be racist. But the other thing I just wanted to highlight about the unity, which I would love to talk about another time, is like, this doesn't jeopardize that. It's just a part of how to get to unity. Because she doesn't say there's no unity. She just says, before you get to unifying with African Americans in particular, you need to know why they stand where they stand economically, socially, politically, and maybe how that might reflect back on, because what I said in my dissertation, that's what I'm arguing. I'm not saying it's just African Americans inherently being dispossessed to being skeptical. It comes from certain realities that even in a diverse world where everyone's being oppressed, there is a certain intensity of oppression that they're facing that feeds into the analysis of like, I am unique. I feel unique in this oppression, and therefore, so it's all material. So again, none of this jeopardizes that. And I just want to add, Claudia Jones, I would love to talk maybe next time about her, because she, even though she is a tether, I guess, she did say a lot of this analysis. She wrote about India under the British. She wrote about the Caribbean. She wrote about women generally, and she wrote about the Soviets. And she also said Black women and Black men get it really bad, even among the communists. So she wasn't somebody who, but somehow this great person was able to figure it out and still do amazing things theoretically. So
again, it's not that people are unaware of the problem. It's that we are approaching a solution very differently, and that's really that's the point. And that's what, so I agree, and I'm down to do that, and we can,
that'd be great. Yeah.
And if we can find something that we can center for some homework, I would love that. That's always my favorite way of doing it. So yeah, Sudip, thank you very much for this. I look forward to our next meeting, and please, folks, find Sudip's work and on his Substack linked in the show description. Please check the rest of the Donut King Project playlist that I will also make sure is linked in the show description as we endeavor towards producing something at some point. And do all the things. I appreciate everybody showing up today. Those who will see and hear this later, thanks to you as well. Peace only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. Tomorrow with Samantha Youssef and in Palestine and film. So come back for that. And I'll catch you next time with more.
And what did you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.